Imagine getting isekai'd into a dark forest where there's literally no one but you. The place is crawling with dangerous beasts, but don't worry, this isn't some hardcore survival story. It's a chill, slow life adventure where the MC starts building a peaceful life from scratch. Bit by bit, he befriends the creatures around him and turns the dangerous forest into something actually livable. So yeah, if you love stories where the MC builds his own world from zero, you're gonna love this one. Let's jump right into it. The story follows Tenno, a 35-year-old guy living a pretty ordinary life. One day, after another late morning and a long day at work, he was texting his little sister while crossing the street, and he got hit by the classic truck-kun. Yeah, pretty standard isekai setup. The next thing he knew, he woke up in what looked like some kind of afterlife. There were 4 other people there, but before he could even talk to them, they started glowing and disappeared. Suddenly, he was the only one left. Then he heard strange voices, probably gods, arguing in confusion. Apparently, they were trying to summon 4 heroes to another world, but something went wrong. If the summoning didn't finish, those heroes would just get sent back. They were called brave heroes, which reminded Tenno of his sister's favorite manga. While the gods were panicking, one of them suddenly yelled, realizing there was one person they had completely forgotten: Tenno. Poor guy wasn't even supposed to be there. Guess those gods were still amateurs at this whole summoning thing. Before he could react, light surrounded him. His body felt weightless, and everything went black. When Tenno opened his eyes again, he was lying in a dense forest. The air was cold and damp, thick fog everywhere, and everything felt heavy. His whole body ached, and his mood sank fast. Was this really another world, or the afterlife? Either way, it wasn't a good start. Thinking back to what the gods said, Tenno realized he might have been accidentally pulled into the hero summoning ritual. He remembered his sister's stories about fantasy worlds full of magic and demons. For a moment, he actually got a bit excited. But when he shouted out loud in the empty forest, there was no response. Kinda awkward. He started walking, but the deeper he went, the creepier it felt. Something strange seemed to be moving inside his body, like a weird energy or maybe a curse. He heard the wind rustling through the trees and tried to laugh it off, but honestly, he was freaking out. Trying to calm himself, he recalled one of his sister's stories about purification magic. Feeling desperate, he muttered a few lines like an idiot pretending to cast a spell, and somehow it worked. The heaviness faded, and the faint black mist around him disappeared. Shocked but relieved, Tenno realized there really was magic, and maybe evil spirits too. Just as he caught his breath, a massive beast appeared behind him. A wolf the size of a horse, with sharp fangs and glowing eyes. Tenno froze, trying to think fast. Run? Fight? Play dead? Before he could decide, the wolf suddenly collapsed. Even while lying down, it growled weakly, and dark mist swirled around its body. It wasn't just an ordinary animal, it was cursed. Seeing it struggle, Tenno couldn't help but feel sorry for it. So, despite his fear, he tried casting the same purification spell again. Light flared up around the wolf, and the dark mist vanished. To his surprise, it actually worked. The wolf stood up, calm this time, like a normal animal. Tenno had always been an animal lover, so when he saw the giant wolf up close, his first thought wasn't fear. It was how cute it looked. Its fur looked so soft that he actually wanted to pet it. As the wolf slowly walked toward him, Tenno froze, thinking he was about to get mauled. But instead, the wolf flopped onto its back and showed its belly like a tame dog asking for belly rubs. That completely caught Tenno off guard. Still, he noticed the wolf's fur was dirty, even after the purification earlier. So, trusting his gut, he tried casting a cleanse spell to wash it off. The magic worked. The wolf's fur turned snow white and gleamed in the faint light. After stretching lazily, the wolf got up and walked away into the woods. Tenno sighed in relief, thinking that was the end of it. But just a few moments later, the two of them were seen running together. Tenno was surprised by how fast he was running, and behind him, the wolf was following. Turns out, this wasn't just any ordinary beast. The wolf had sensed something strange from Tenno, something that told it this human wasn't normal at all. 200 years ago, this forest fell into darkness. No one knew how it happened. only that somehow humanity was responsible. When the darkness swallowed everything, the law of the jungle took over. The weak perished, and only the strongest survived. Among those survivors was King Fenrir, the same massive wolf Tenno had mistaken for a regular wolf. For 2 centuries, Fenrir had witnessed death, decay, and silence. His magic was strong enough to keep the darkness at bay for a while, but every use of purification drained his power. He couldn't afford to die yet, not before taking revenge on the humans who had cursed his forest. Then, one day, he caught the scent of a human, Tenno. Rage boiled inside him, but his body was too weak. Just as he was about to collapse, Tenno cast purification on him. Fenrir didn't expect much. To him, that spell only offered brief relief. But this time, the darkness vanished completely. He was stunned. The human before him carried overflowing magic, pure, limitless, and warm. It was the first time in centuries Fenrir felt peace, and the first time he didn't hate a human. Back to the present. Tenno and Fenrir climbed a hill, and once they reached the top, Tenno noticed a cave shrouded in darkness. It seemed like Fenrir wanted to show him that place. The atmosphere was eerie, the kind that made your skin crawl, and though Tenno hesitated to step inside, he decided to try using purification magic first. The spell worked, but only slightly. The darkness faded a little, yet the curse still lingered. As he stepped in, several glowing eyes appeared from within the shadows. It was a den full of wolves, all glaring at Tenno with clear hostility toward humans. But before anything could happen, Fenrir stepped forward, growling low, defending Tenno. That alone was enough to calm them down a bit, and Tenno quickly cast purification again. This time, the spell reached deeper, revealing piles of weakened wolves barely clinging to life. Fenrir's expression made it obvious. He was placing his hopes on Tenno. So, despite his fatigue, Tenno decided to give it another try. To use magic, Tenno always had to visualize what he wanted first. It was how his power worked. He imagined a wave of light spreading through the cave and cast a large-scale purification spell. In an instant, the darkness and curse vanished completely. Only then did he notice it wasn't just wolves. There were also dogs among them. Their fur was filthy, so Tenno used a simple cleaning spell to wash them all, making their coats shine again. It was strange, wolves and dogs living together in the same den, seemingly as friends. For now, Tenno didn't know what to do next. As he looked around, he noticed 2 paths deeper inside the cave. He turned to Fenrir, but the great beast shook his head, indicating he didn't know either. Still, Tenno could tell the wolves understood what he said, which was fascinating in itself. Curiosity got the better of him. He decided to move forward, believing the deeper the darkness, the stronger the curse, and maybe the closer he'd get to its source. He kept casting purification spells as they went, but the corruption seemed endless. The wolves started weakening again, so Tenno thought fast. He visualized a protective barrier and cast it, forming a glowing layer that blocked the curse from spreading inside. He wasn't sure if the barrier could withstand physical attacks though, so to be safe, he strengthened it. The light thickened, shimmering brighter around them, a fragile yet hopeful shield in the middle of the darkness. Tenno kept exploring deeper into the cave. It was way bigger than he expected. As the darkness grew thicker, he thought it'd be smart to cast a spell that let him see in the dark. So he imagined night vision and spatial awareness, then closed his eyes. Instantly, a clear image of his surroundings projected into his mind, like a mental map. Using that, he cast another barrier deeper into the cave, and as the barrier expanded, it pushed away the darkness, making the path visible. But before long, a massive boulder blocked the way forward. Tenno didn't even touch it yet, when the rock suddenly exploded. Instinctively, he raised his arm, but his barrier shielded him just in time. He felt something hitting against the barrier and realized there might be a curse inside that boulder. Then, strangely, the massive rock began to shrink, releasing dark energy until it became a small stone pulsing with a black aura. It almost felt alive. Curious, Tenno tried purification magic, but this time it didn't work. That threw him off. His purification had never failed before. Maybe his visualization wasn't strong enough? Determined, he imagined a persistent spell that would peel away the curse layer by layer. Slowly, the stone cracked and finally burst open. From inside, a tiny bird emerged, covered in blood and trembling weakly. It fluttered toward Tenno, clearly wounded. Without hesitation, Tenno visualized a healing spell that worked down to the cellular level. A soft light wrapped around the bird, closing its wounds and restoring its strength. Within moments, the creature looked healthy again, its feathers now gleaming. Feeling playful, Tenno teased it for being so small, only to get pecked right on the finger. It surprised him, but he laughed. Just like the wolves, this bird could understand him. Despite its size, it had quite the personality, and honestly, Tenno found it kind of adorable. After exploring the cave, Tenno took a short break, his head buzzing with questions, like why the barrier he made was literally glowing. There were still so many things about this new world he didn't understand. While resting, he noticed something weird. The black shadows outside were trying to slip through the barrier, but instead of just blocking them, the barrier fought back. It was almost like it had a will of its own. For now though, that meant Tenno could relax a bit. He knew he should probably study the magic more, but something else caught his attention. The wolves and dogs around him looked healthier. Their fur was clean, their breathing steady. It was strange, especially since none of them, including Fenrir, had eaten anything since they met. Still, he had bigger problems to deal with. Finding a safe place to sleep, some food, and water. Survival came first because he wanted to stay alive and not get caught up in something absurd and die. The cave could actually be a perfect shelter if he could purify it completely. But before that, he had to handle the black shadows outside the barrier. The fact that they reacted to his magic meant they had a source somewhere out there. It made his skin crawl, knowing something dark was still lurking nearby. He wanted to locate the source, but he couldn't purify it without seeing where it came from. So he activated his spatial awareness spell again, creating a mental mini-map of the cave. It helped, but the darkness was too thick in some areas, blurring the image. He needed something more, something that let him see from another angle. That's when he thought about drones. Back on Earth, drones gave aerial views. Why not try that with magic? He imagined a floating drone powered by clairvoyance magic, something that could scout from above. When he cast the spell, an interface appeared before him, like a holographic screen. On it, he saw a mountain surrounded by forests wrapped in black mist. Tenno observed carefully, then decided to purify everything within the drone's view. He even tried to send the curse back to wherever it came from. "You reap what you sow," he muttered under his breath. Then, with a large-scale purification spell, he cleansed the mountain's surroundings and created a massive barrier to keep the darkness from seeping back in. When Tenno unleashed that massive spell, he felt something flow out of his body, maybe his magic itself. Slowly, his barrier spread from the mountain to the surrounding forest, purifying everything in its path. By the time he finished, the woods looked alive again. No more black mist, no more corruption. For a moment, it felt peaceful, but an hour later, the shadows came back. When Tenno checked through his magical interface, he realized the curse was coming from deep underground. That ticked him off. This curse wasn't just stubborn, it was mocking him. So this time, he went all in. He cast another large-scale purification spell, way stronger than before, expanding the barrier deep into the earth and forcefully sending the curse back to its source. The spell worked, but the toll hit him hard. His hands trembled, his head pounded. It wasn't physical exhaustion, it was mental. He sat there, drained, his mind whispering the one thing he didn't want to admit. He wanted to go home. Sensing his distress, Fenrir quietly walked up and rested his heavy head on Tenno's lap. Despite the weight, the warmth helped calm him. For a while, Tenno just sat there, lost in thought, comforted by the silent presence of his companion. Meanwhile, far away in a human kingdom, deep within a royal chamber, stood a massive altar with a glowing magic stone at its center. Only now, that stone was beginning to erode. The next morning, a messenger rushed to the king, reporting something strange. An enormous white light had been seen bursting from the center of the forest. The king listened, then grinned. He assumed it was the Forest King's final struggle before death. With twisted excitement, he ordered more blood sacrifices to the magic stone, convinced that soon he would claim the forest, the center of the world, for himself. Long ago, that forest had been ruled by powerful beasts under a mighty king. But now, the human king wanted it all to himself. He didn't care how much blood it took, because in his madness, he believed this was the way. Meanwhile, in the Beastfolk Kingdom, a royal messenger reported troubling news about the forest to their king. Whether this kingdom was good or evil wasn't clear yet, but one thing was certain. They knew the human kingdom of Envelas had cast a massive and complex spell called Magic Eye across the entire forest. That dark magic had wiped out countless sacred beasts, replacing them with demonic creatures. For the past 200 years, no nation had dared to oppose it, mainly because every country near the forest had already been wiped off the map. The Beastfolk King suspected Envelas was behind it all, sacrificing hundreds of thousands of souls to maintain that wicked spell. They had no proof yet, but everyone knew one thing. Humanity was close to dominating the world, and when that happened, the Beastfolk Kingdom might vanish just like the others. All they could do now was pray to the god of creation to stop the chaos. Back in the forest, Tenno woke up feeling refreshed, greeted by blue skies and his animal companions. He honestly thought the wolves would have left him by now, so he asked if they wanted to stay with him. Fenrir, who Tenno still thought was just a regular wolf, only growled softly in response. Tenno didn't understand, but he decided to name them anyway. The white, messy-furred wolf he met from the start got the name Koa. Two others with similar white fur, like Koa, were named Soa for the female and Hio for the male. The two male black and white wolves became Kuro and Shion, while the dog-like one he met earlier was named Chai. Finally, the tiny bird from the cave got the name Karen, based on its beautiful, gradient-colored feathers and lovely voice. Tenno thought he had great taste in names, though if his little sister were here, she'd probably say otherwise. Still, Fenrir, now officially Koa, was thrilled. He proudly told the other wolves that their human had given them names, and to him, that meant everything. If not for Tenno, the Fenrir race would have gone extinct. Koa deeply respected Tenno, not just for his strength and magic, but for his kindness. Even just being near Tenno made them stronger. Koa had already regained most of his magical power. So as the king of Fenrir, Koa ordered all the wolves to serve Tenno as their new lord. The direwolf Chai, who had long lived under Fenrir's protection, also decided to follow along. From that day, Koa swore that his pack would give their all for Tenno. Later, while they were talking, Tenno asked Koa if he knew where they could find water. The wolves all went silent, staring at him for a moment. Then suddenly, Kuro and Shion bolted down the mountain, competing to guide him. Surprised, Tenno chased after them, following until they passed beyond the barrier. When they finally stopped, Tenno froze. Before him was a pool of black water, bubbling like it was alive. He wasn't even sure it was water, but Kuro and Shion looked so excited, he didn't have the heart to tell them. The water was clearly cursed. Purifying it would take a long time. Still, he smiled and praised the two wolves for their effort. They wagged their tails proudly. For now, Tenno decided to head back. He was still exhausted, and he'd need more strength to cleanse that place. But as he walked, his mind kept picturing clean, clear water. And then, out of nowhere, it appeared. Cool, sparkling water flowed right into his palm, conjured by his magic. When Tenno made water appear from his hands with magic, a thought hit him. If he could create water, maybe he could create anything. So he tried imagining a full gyudon meal, steaming hot with all the sides. But nothing happened. Not even a grain of rice. He tried simpler stuff, like cabbage, chicken, and apples. Still nothing. Maybe it was impossible to create food or ingredients that didn't exist in this world. Looks like he'd have to find his own food the old-fashioned way. For shelter, Tenno figured the Rocky Mountain could work as a base, but first, he had to make sure the area was safe. He still hoped the forest had edible plants or fruits, but after wandering around for hours, all he found were plain trees. No fruits, no nuts, nothing. When he complained about starving to death, Hio suddenly bumped him from behind and barked. Then, Hyo, Kuro, and Shion exchanged glances and dashed off into the forest. Tenno had no clue where they were going. He couldn't understand Fenrir's language anyway. Even their leader, Koa, just barked whenever Tenno tried to talk. Still, Tenno trusted they'd return soon, so he invited Koa to keep searching for food with him. As they explored further down the mountain, he stumbled upon another cave, bigger and cleaner than the one before. Using spatial awareness, Tenno scanned its structure. The cave had several upper paths and underground chambers, roughly the size of a 3-story building. Just seeing it made him excited. Before long, the 3 wolves returned, dragging a huge monster that looked like a cursed wild boar. Their tails wagged proudly. They had hunted it for him. But Tenno hesitated. The creature looked terrifying, still wrapped in black miasma. Yet seeing the wolves' eager faces, he couldn't just turn them down. He praised their hard work, hugged them, and quietly wondered who's supposed to dismantle this thing. First things first, he needed to cleanse the curse. He pictured a vacuum cleaner sucking up all the black energy, then purified it while sending the curse back to its source. In seconds, the mist vanished, leaving behind a clean, oversized wild boar, now officially edible. But there was another issue. The wolves couldn't exactly butcher it themselves, which meant Tenno had to do it, alone. He gulped. The sight of the giant body was intimidating, but the hungry stares from the wolves pushed him to act fast. He figured the meat might spoil if left out, so he imagined the cooling effect of a luxury refrigerator and cast refrigeration. Instantly, a wave of chill spread through the monster's flesh. Step 1, done. Then came the part he dreaded, the blood. Tenno hated blood. Just looking inside made his stomach twist. Still, he tried to find a magical workaround. What if he treated the blood like water and just drained it out gently? He tried draining it carefully, imagining the liquid flowing away like water. Not too dry, just enough. Still, when he peeked inside and saw the organs, his stomach churned. Meanwhile, the wolves were busy gossiping about what their lord was doing. From their point of view, that giant boar monster would have tasted way better if eaten fresh and hot. While they grumbled about that, Tenno was deep in thought, figuring out how to get rid of the veins and organs inside the monster's body. Eventually, he decided to just rip them out instantly and burn them. On the other side, Koa was explaining to the others that their master didn't have claws or fangs like they did, so things naturally took longer for him. The others were ready to help, of course. They just didn't move unless ordered. Anyway, Tenno cast instantaneous movement, pulling out the monster's veins in a blink. The wolves wagged their tails, impressed, until he immediately burned everything to ashes with a burn spell. With the blood dealt with, Tenno moved on to the next step, getting rid of the nasty smell. He'd cut fish before, but this was on a whole different level. Boars had organs like a heart, kidneys, and brain. Gross, but he had no choice. Using the same spell, he removed all the organs. The wolves got even more excited, thinking they'd get to eat the good parts, but Tenno burned those too. Their faces dropped, while Tenno smiled in relief as the stench finally faded. Once that was done, he used wind magic to slice the massive corpse into neat chunks. In no time, the monster was reduced to clean slabs of meat. He took one piece to cook for himself and handed the rest to the wolves. Hyo, Kuro, and Shion dashed off first, practically drooling. Nearby, Chai hesitated and asked King Fenrir if he could eat too. Of course, Koa allowed it, reminding him they all needed to cooperate if they wanted their forest restored. Seeing Chai's timid posture, Koa reminded him that he was once a king too, the king of direwolves. But Chai just lowered his head, saying he'd long abandoned that title, now nothing more than a failed leader who couldn't protect his own pack. While they ate, Koa told Chai to start calling each other by the names their lord had given them. Apparently, receiving a name from a figure such as a master was something they'd dreamed of for ages. Meanwhile, Tenno was struggling with his own meal. He'd burned the meat into charcoal. Sighing, he asked the wolves for another piece and decided to try again. This time, smarter. He placed the meat on a flat rock, imagined it being grilled over charcoal, and added a layer of infrared heat to cook it evenly. Slowly, smoke began to rise, and a rich, mouth-watering aroma filled the air. The wolves instantly turned their heads, drool dripping as they watched. After a few minutes, the meat was perfectly cooked, crispy brown on the outside, juicy red on the inside. Tenno skewered it with a stick, took a bite, and his eyes lit up. Delicious. But while they all enjoyed their meal, none of them noticed the dark shadow lurking deep within the cave, silently watching. After finishing their meal, Tenno and the others started exploring the cave they'd found earlier to see if it could serve as a proper base. Inside and out, the place looked stable. No traps, no strange traces of life. With its high ceiling and wide space, Tenno decided the first floor would make a perfect main hall. Then he went deeper, to the first underground level. It was even larger than he expected, the ceiling towering high above, with a shimmering light coming from the back wall that caught his attention. The area seemed safe, but that dark, cursed presence he'd felt earlier was still lurking somewhere below. Activating his spatial awareness again, he checked the surroundings and the barrier he'd cast before, wondering how long it would last. He didn't understand much about magic yet, and that bothered him. If he wanted to survive here, he had to learn more. Still, since the disturbance came from below, there was no choice but to go deeper. Hugging Koa for comfort, Tenno hesitated. He didn't want to go down there, but Koa licked his face, reassuring him in his own way. With that, Tenno took a breath and descended, and sure enough, there it was. A thick cluster of black miasma seething with curses. Koa immediately growled, sensing danger. Before Tenno could react, another black mass appeared, rushing forward. Startled, Tenno tried to cast purification, but it didn't work. The barrier he'd set earlier was what activated instead, cleansing the darkness the moment it touched it. He blinked in confusion. Just the barrier alone could purify it? But when the miasma vanished, nothing was left behind. At least, that's what he thought, until he glanced down and noticed a tiny creature on the ground. It looked like an insect, or maybe a spider. It was no wonder he hadn't noticed it sooner. It was barely the size of his finger. It even had wings. Before he could examine it properly, another surge of dark mist seeped from the ground. Tenno calmly purified it again, and this time, more creatures appeared. What came out of the black lump of shadows was a chief spider, followed by about 20 young spiders. So there were insects in this world after all, or maybe monsters. Tenno wasn't sure. While he was lost in thought, Koa crouched low to inspect them. But before either of them could react, Chief Spider suddenly jumped, landing right on Tenno's head. He flinched, shaking his hair, trying not to panic. Meanwhile, poor Chai had baby spiders crawling all over him, spinning in circles, trying to shake them off. Yet, despite all that, the spiders didn't attack. They just stayed close, calm, and harmless. Seeing that, Tenno realized maybe these creatures weren't enemies at all. Forget about the spiders for now. Tenno's more focused on the second underground layer. The place is surprisingly huge, and he plans to explore it later. Right now, what really matters is understanding how magic works. Before this, he'd just been shouting spells and purifying things without any clear image in his head. But according to his sister, visualization is key to using magic properly. So, Tenno decides to test it. First, he casts a fire spell without imagining anything, and nothing happens. Then, he tries a water spell, still not visualizing anything, and suddenly, a puddle appears beside him. That just confuses him even more. Next, he tries again, this time imagining fire clearly in his mind, and it works perfectly. Now he's even more lost. Fire needs an image, but water doesn't. After several tries, he comes up with a theory. When learning a new spell, a clear mental image is needed, but once the spell is mastered, just saying the chant might be enough. It's just a hypothesis, but it seems to fit. While he's deep in thought, the flame he summoned suddenly flickers, revealing a crack in the stone wall where air is leaking out. It's dark inside, too dark to see, so Tenno imagines a ball of light to light it up. The spell works, but the light's way too bright, making Koa squint. After adjusting the brightness a few times, Tenno sighs in relief. Controlling magic precisely is way harder than he thought. Once the glow is just right, he peeks through the crack and spots something shiny inside the crevice. The chief spider, small enough to squeeze through, crawls in and comes back carrying a fragment of the glittering stone. Up close, the stone looks stunning, silvery, and luminous. Tenno thanks the chief, thinking that chief really is the right name for the biggest spider. When Tenno holds the fragment, Kuro and Shion rush over, clearly excited. He doesn't really get why. They seem to recognize the stone as something rare. Sure, it looks beautiful, but Tenno decides to store it away for now. He's more interested in exploring the upper floors anyway. Meanwhile, the wolves are buzzing with disbelief. Their master just found mithril, a precious metal, and reacted like it was no big deal. After exploring the entire cave, Tenno finds no more hidden passages or rooms. With that, the conquest of the Rocky Mountain is complete. A moment later, Tenno started unpacking the few things left in his small bag. Just a wallet, shopping receipts, and what looked like a shopping voucher. Nothing useful. He sighed, realizing his smartphone had probably been thrown away when he got hit by that truck. His original plan after securing the cave as a base was to look for other humans. But for now, he wanted to make this place at least comfortable enough to sleep in. The rocky floor was killing his back. He mumbled at the thought of something smoother and softer. But then, out of nowhere, his magic activated on its own. The rough stone floor he rubbed beneath him started to shine, turning perfectly smooth and polished in an instant. Tenno froze, stunned. The wolves stared too, their tails wagging in awe. Apparently, just by imagining it, he could enhance the cave's comfort that easily. Before long, the entire floor looked like a glossy ice rink. Koa and the others couldn't hide their excitement, praising their master for the miracle. Eager to test it, Koa stepped onto the new floor and almost slipped right away. Chai tried next and ended up sliding just the same. The floor might have been too slick, but one thing was clear. Everyone was thrilled by their shiny new home. That night, Chief Spider quietly observed the barrier Tenno had cast. It shimmered faintly, pushing back the black miasma and curses trying to invade. The sight stirred memories within him, reminding him of who he once was. Long ago, he was the one who wore Hell's flames, dragging any prey foolish enough to approach into molten fire. His kin feared him, and anyone who laid eyes on his true form was doomed to die. He was once known as Tarunia, the Death Keeper. Now though, his body was small, nothing like the terrifying being he used to be. He had spent nearly all his magic protecting his children, and that was the only reason he was still alive. Still, he couldn't stop wondering how such powerful miasma could vanish so completely. While he was lost in thought, a familiar voice called his name, Tarunia. It was King Fenrir who was Koa. As he suspected, the little creature was someone he knew. Seizing the moment, Tarunia asked about the darkness that once engulfed the forest. Koa explained that Tenno was the one who purified it. He even saved the Fenrir race from destruction. Tarunia was skeptical at first. A human did that? But Koa assured him that Tenno's magic was extraordinary, far beyond human standards. That's why the Fenrir clan had chosen to serve him. Koa's tone then turned sharp, warning Tarunia not to do anything against their master, or he'd deal with him personally. But Tarunia wasn't reckless. He had already sensed Tenno's overwhelming mana. It was hundreds of times greater than both his and Koa's combined at full strength. Koa smirked, satisfied with the response. He joked about not wanting to lose another king of the forest. Before leaving, Koa also asked him to tell his kids to stop teasing Chai. Chai? Tarunia tilted his head. Koa proudly explained that their master had given them all names now. That reminded Tarunia. Tenno had called him Chief. The name felt strange, yet warm. Maybe he kind of liked it. From now on, he'd be Chief. Before wrapping up their talk, Chief mentioned he'd sensed a terrifying burst of magic the previous night and wondered if Koa knew anything about it. Koa guessed it was probably a human attack, but thankfully, Tenno's barrier completely blocked it. That revelation left Chief speechless. A barrier strong enough to stop that kind of magic? That should have been impossible. Even Koa admitted he couldn't hold a barrier like that for more than a second, but Tenno hadn't even flinched. Meanwhile, in one corner of the cave, Tenno sat deep in thought. The idea that there might be no other humans in this world had been bothering him. A few days ago, after setting up the cave as his base, he sent out his clairvoyance drone to scout the forest. But no matter how far it flew, there wasn't a single sign of human life, just animals wandering around. No villages, no roads, nothing but endless trees stretching to the horizon. That realization annoyed him. He grumbled and sulked for a while, but his mood lifted when he remembered how smoothly the cave renovation had gone. Bit by bit, it was turning into a real home. He'd already smoothed the floors and walls, carved stairs connecting the upper and lower levels, and even practiced instantaneous movement magic while shaping the passages. From the outside, the place looked like an ordinary rocky mountain, but inside, it had become a 4-story home with 2 underground floors. Here are the details of the cave map for now. The second basement, where he'd found Chief, was planned to be a mithril processing room, or silver, at least that's what Tenno thought it was. The first basement, which held golden ores, was now a chilled storage room. The first floor was his main hall, thanks to its high ceiling. The second floor was still undecided. The third served as a stone storage area, and the top floor was his safe, cozy bedroom. Even with all that progress, Tenno couldn't help feeling a little lonely. There was no one to talk to, besides the wolves, who occasionally brought him fresh game. Lately, Koa and the others had been competing over who could devour the organs first. He figured that was fine for animals, but honestly, he was getting sick of meat. What he really wanted was fish. While he was relaxing and roasting meat, Koa suddenly growled. Before Tenno could ask why, a powerful wave of curses blew through the forest, sending the wolves into a panic. They bolted out, tails tucked between their legs. Tenno sighed in frustration. His peaceful evening ruined again. He walked to the edge of the mountain, took a deep breath to calm down, and summoned his clairvoyance drone once more. Through its view, he saw the entire forest blanketed in a thin layer of curses. In the distance, where he remembered a huge lake outside his old barrier, everything was now shrouded in darkness. So he decided to purify everything up to that lake, and at the same time expand and strengthen the barrier. Koa barked in alarm, clearly worried, but Tenno barely noticed. He was focused. He'd gotten used to magic now, and he was confident he could pull it off. He pictured a thin thread stretching far into the distance, reaching toward the lake. It was far, but he could feel the connection. Light gathered in his hands as he imagined spreading his magic across the forest, covering everything, even the underground. Then, with the words barrier and purification, he activated the spell. A surge of power rippled outward, spreading rapidly through the land. In moments, the entire forest glowed faintly as the curses lifted. Just like that, Tenno had purified the forest and expanded his barrier tenfold. Somehow, his body even felt lighter afterward. Watching from behind, both Chief and Koa could only stare in awe. They realized neither of them could ever match Tenno's power. Still, Tenno noticed something odd. Some of the lake's water was still tainted, so he planned to filter it using the barrier itself, turning it into a giant purification screen. But one thing was certain, someone out there was casting these curses, and from now on, Tenno decided he'd send those piles of curses right back to whoever was behind them. Meanwhile, in the human kingdom of Envelas, protected by a massive magic circle powered by towering pillars, 2 knights in full armor crossed paths. One was Mizlost, commander of the 4th Chivalric Order, who had just returned from scouting the forest. The other was Ganmirs, commander of the 1st Chivalric Order. Mizlost looked relaxed after his patrol. The forest hadn't changed much, barely any monsters were showing up, and with the king's powerful barrier holding strong, he felt the kingdom was completely safe. His cheerful mood clashed with Ganmir's, who seemed uneasy. A few days earlier, a strange light had burst out from the center of the forest, spreading in every direction. Yes, the king's magic stone allowed humans to suppress the forest kings, but Ganmir's had never seen such a drastic shift before. It bothered him. Mizlost noticed the worry, explaining that the 4th expedition had been increased because of it, but he still insisted everything was fine. Envelas had survived foreign invasions for hundreds of years, thanks to the king and the court magicians. Even so, they still needed to stay cautious of magical beasts outside the barrier. After saying that, Mizlost headed home to rest. Left alone, Ganmir's thoughts drifted back to the magic stone. The complex spell Magic Eye, used to control the forest known as the center of the world, was supported by just a single stone. Rumor said it came from an ancient ruin and gave off an unnatural magical presence. Some even whispered that the blood of the magicians who tried to analyze it had been spilled. The king and his court magicians were the first to tap into its power, halting their own aging and ruling for centuries. Ganmir's had investigated this himself, unable to shake his curiosity about the stone holding the entire kingdom together. His train of thought broke when a line of beastfolk slaves walked past him, eyes lifeless. A glowing crest burned on their backs, likely a slave seal. Behind them, the old slave trader snapped his whip to make them move faster. Ganmir's spoke briefly with the old man, who complained he was running out of stock. 50 beastfolk slaves had already been taken as offerings for the magic stone. With a grumble that they'll need more, the old man walked off. Before Ganmir's could process what that meant, another knight approached him. Gamul, commander of the 5th Chivalric Order. Ganmir's knew him well, a battle addict who lived for bloodshed. He immediately noticed Gamul's new sword. It turned out to be a gift from the king, a magic blade that grew sharper and stronger with every drop of blood it drank, much like the king's own sword. Gamul, excited like a mad dog, spotted a few beastfolk slaves nearby. With a single swing, he sliced through several of them, their heads hitting the ground before their bodies even fell. The blade gleamed, hungering for more. But Gamul clicked his tongue in disappointment. Killing slaves wasn't fun. They didn't react because of the slave crest. From a distance, Ganmir's acted like he was used to it, but inside, disgust twisted in his chest. The kingdom of Envelas, he realized, had gone completely insane. Meanwhile, in the forest, Tenno was proudly testing a simple fishing rod he'd made from a branch. He was ridiculously happy with it, so happy that even the wolves were playing with it like it was a new toy. With high hopes, he headed straight to the lake to finally catch some fish, only to find the water still contaminated by curses. It completely crushed him. But quitting wasn't an option. He tried purifying the lake again, chanting his spell, but the result didn't even budge. Curses mixed into water were way harder to clean than he thought, so he attempted a different approach, casting a barrier to temporarily seal the lake and the downstream river. It looked promising, but Tenno wasn't sure he could pull it off. His idea was to filter the river's source through a barrier membrane, but separating the curse across such a huge area felt impossible. The stuff was everywhere, like dirt scattered in the wind. Then, while petting Koa's fur, inspiration hit him. Static electricity, like when dust sticks to your hand. With that thought, he raised his hand toward the lake and imagined coating its entire surface with a static charge. Chanting adsorption, he watched as the scattered curse slowly clumped together, rising to the surface. Soon enough, the lake looked less like cursed water and more like a toxic waste pond. At the same time, inside Envelas, specifically the chamber housing the Great Magic Stone, the court magicians sensed something off. One mage realized the stone was being pressured from somewhere close. As they investigated, they spotted a faint glow on the stone's surface and immediately recognized the area. It was the lake. Back in the forest, Tenno had finished gathering every bit of curse into one massive floating clump. And today, he planned to keep his promise, send the curse back to whoever cast it. With the chant, "Return," the entire mass was slowly sucked into a void, disappearing completely. The cursed water cleared in an instant, leaving the lake sparkling clean. Sunlight reflected off the pure surface, turning it into something peaceful and almost magical. Even the river brightened, and fresh fruits began appearing along the forest again. Tenno couldn't wait to see the animals return. His job here was done, so he headed home to continue working on his interior design project. Back in the Magic Stone room, one mage noticed a scratch on the surface of the stone. A moment later, a burst of blinding light exploded from it. Fear spread across his face when he saw a long, deep crack running across the stone. Looks like Tenno's little return to sender actually worked. Meanwhile, in the throne room, the king was listening to the daily reports, though he looked like he'd fall asleep any second. The only thing he actually cared about was news from the forest. He'd already increased the sacrifices for the Magic Stone barrier and expected the forest to be in his grasp soon. He clearly had a plan, use the forest kings for his own benefit, and then wipe out the filthy Beastman kingdom afterward. Right as he was lost in his fantasies, a guard burst into the room, shouting with panic. His face was pale as he reported an emergency. The magic stone had cracked. At first, the king and his advisors thought it was a joke. The chamber was protected by a high-class barrier, after all. But the guard insisted there was nothing wrong with the barrier. The entire room had flashed with blinding light, and once it faded, a huge crack appeared across the magic stone. The king's expression twisted into fury. With a single slash of his sword, he cut the guard clean in half, using him as an outlet for his rage. The throne room fell into a suffocating silence. Ganmirts, watching from the side, hated the king's cruelty, but he couldn't speak up or his fate would be like a slave's. Then, the king called for Mislost, commander of the 4th Chivalric Order, and ordered him to rush into the forest immediately and investigate the source of the problem. A few days later, deep in the forest, Tenno and Koa were sprinting for their lives as a gigantic wooden plank came crashing down behind them. They barely dodged it in time. But why in the world did a massive plank fall from the sky like that? Well, we're about to find out. Lately, Tenno had been busy upgrading his cave house. What used to be a shapeless hole in the mountain now looked like an actual home. He even built a grill on the first floor so he could roast meat properly. The first floor had become a full kitchen and dining area, big enough for everyone to eat together. The smell of roasted meat instantly made Koa drool, and Tenno couldn't help giving him a few pieces. Koa was so shocked by how good it tasted that the other wolves wanted some too. Tenno already planned to feed them, but before that, he called Chai over. Chai hesitated, feeling unworthy, but with his friends cheering him on, he finally took the meat. And just like that, they all started eating together from that day on. After a good meal, nothing beats a warm bath. And for Tenno, it felt like heaven. Sure, he could clean himself with magic, but as a Japanese guy, he just couldn't abandon the concept of bathing. No soap, no company, just hot water in a big tub. Perfect. Then came the part he'd been dreaming of, a toilet. For days, he had to sneak into the forest just to do his business. But now, he could finally stop suffering. He used his magic to polish stone and ended up making an actual working toilet. Even better, he added a sink, and both came with auto-cleaning. He was so excited that he yelled in celebration, which unfortunately made Koa rush over out of curiosity, catching Tenno mid-poop. Koa instantly felt guilty for seeing his master in such a vulnerable state, while Tenno nearly died of embarrassment. Still, he was so proud of his creation that he made a toilet on every floor. During magic practice, Tenno also discovered he could stretch mithril, yes, mithril, into thin glass-like sheets. Koa and Chief were stunned. Since the transparent mithril looked great, Tenno used it as window panes. Then, inspiration hit him. Why not build wooden floors too? So he headed into the forest to chop down a straight, sturdy tree. He remembered from TV that wood needed years of drying, but magic made all of that easy. He stripped the bark, cleaned the trunk, and used wind magic to slice it into planks. And this brings us back to the opening scene. Tenno forgot to cut the base properly, causing the gigantic plank to topple over and nearly flatten him and Koa. Thankfully, they survived, and now he had plenty of wood to work with. Using instantaneous movement, he casually teleported the planks to the front of the house, letting them float straight into the 4th floor like it was nothing. Not long after, the wooden planks were stacked neatly on the 4th floor, and Tenno finally started working on the wood flooring. In his head, it sounded easy, but reality hit hard. Every plank had gaps, the thickness wasn't consistent, and the boards were way too huge and heavy. Even his instantaneous movement magic wasn't much help. Somehow, the perfect floor plan in his imagination turned into a mess, and only after all that work, he realized the wood could get moldy if installed on solid stone. On top of that, he still had tons of leftover planks, so Tenno decided to try something else. He wished he had an edge tool, something to shave wood slowly and precisely. Since he didn't, he tried making one from silver or mithril. He stretched the ore until it became thin like a blade, and when he tested it on a rock, it actually pierced straight in. That mountain rock wasn't soft at all, so he told himself to be careful with it. But with magic, the rock became flexible, almost like clay. That fascinated Tenno, and he even started thinking about making a pot, because he was getting tired of eating only meat. While imagining tools like window hinges and other parts, he accidentally shaped the mountain rock into a doll, and it didn't look bad at all. He hadn't played with clay in years, so it was actually fun. He got carried away and made a few more dolls, even adjusting their eyes so they could glow. The next morning, after falling asleep while making dolls, Tenno woke up to something absurd. The perfectly installed wood flooring he dreamed of was already done. The planks were neatly placed with 0 gaps, complete with a foundation. And guess who did it? Yep, the dolls he made from mountain rock. They were hauling wooden boards with their tiny bodies, moving like professional carpenters. One even acted like the lead worker, pointing and directing the others with surprising precision. Tenno and the wolves just stood there, stunned, all eyes slowly turning to him as if asking, "What did you do?" He seriously had no idea. 9 dolls were moving, meaning 1 was missing. And when he thought back, he remembered shaping those dolls while thinking about tiny elves from that story, the ones who helped a shoemaker at night. He even wished the flooring could magically finish while he slept. Maybe that wish actually stuck. Tenno eventually found the last doll lying still. It was the 10th one he made. After that, Tenno walked up to the dolls and told them to stop working and gather around. To his surprise, they actually listened. The little stone bodies lined up neatly in front of him, like they were trained for this. Then he turned to the last inactive doll. He touched it, pushed a simple command into it, telling it to act as a helper robot. Instantly, it stood up, glowing faintly, and began guiding the other dolls like a supervisor. Just like that, Tenno suddenly had a full squad of tiny stoneworkers. Meanwhile, Koa and the other wolves were in complete panic. Tears welled in their eyes the moment they recognized what the dolls really were. Golems, the same weapons humans once used to invade the forest. No wonder they were terrified. From Tenno's point of view, they just looked extremely cautious around the stone dolls. Even so, he hoped they could learn to get along eventually. The next morning, Tenno left the wood flooring work on the 2nd and 3rd floors to the dolls, finally freeing him up to do something he'd been craving, looking for vegetables and spices. Walking through the forest with Koa, he noticed a thin layer of fog still lingering. He cleaned it up as they moved, wondering if the floating light spot was really the source of the curse. He also couldn't help thinking about the people on the other side, since he kept sending their curse right back at them. Either way, the forest was way brighter now compared to when he first arrived. While enjoying the peaceful walk, he spotted something shocking, a fruit hanging high up in a tree, his first fruit here. He tried climbing, stretching, and even jumping, but the tree was just too tall. Right when frustration kicked in, a spider suddenly hopped onto the trunk and waved at him like it was signaling something. Then 8 more followed, crawling up the tree. That's when it hit him. These were the young spiders, and they'd grown fast, basically as big as Chief now. He hoped it was just in his head, but no. Koa and the other wolves were bigger too. The young spiders came back down carrying the fruit for him. It was round, bright red, and about 3 times the size of an orange. Tenno wasn't sure if it was edible, so he carefully split it open. Inside was juicy, vibrant flesh. One bite, and his whole body trembled. Tears even slipped out. He hadn't tasted anything sweet in so long. The crisp texture reminded him of a peach. Of course, he shared it with Koa and the young spiders. A while later, they had way more fruit than expected. Tenno had accidentally picked too much, and now had no idea what to do with the pile. His bag could only hold 1 at a time. Joking to himself, he wished the bag worked like a robot's pocket. And right on cue, magic happened. The fruit slipped into the bag effortlessly. He tested a few more, and yep, everything fit. Magic really was convenient. He kept exploring until he found more vegetables. Meanwhile, the wolves had gone hunting. By the time Tenno returned home, several animals were already laid out, and Shiro and the others ran up to him excitedly, like they were asking for praise. Not wanting to lose, Tenno proudly revealed the fruits and vegetables he found. Even without salt, he thought their diet would improve with all this. He drained the boar's blood, then used wind magic to peel the skin clean off. Once the meat was ready, he sliced it and laid it neatly on wooden boards for the wolves. He even saved the organs for them, but reminded them, at least in spirit, to to eat properly. While the wolves dug in, Tenno set aside portions for himself and storage. Salt would have helped him make ham or something fancy, but for now, this was good enough. He stored the rest in the refrigerated room in the basement, then stared at the vegetables, unsure where to keep them. In the main room, Karen was drooling over the meat Tenno was grilling. He knew the bird preferred cooked meat anyway. This time, he paired the meat with the sweet, cabbage-like vegetables he'd found, plus a tangy fruit with a refreshing scent. He wrapped the grilled meat with the veggies and squeezed the sour fruit over the top. The taste was richer, way better than plain meat. Still not perfect. He wished he had a proper sauce. Then, mid-bite, a thought struck him. He hadn't seen Chief at all, even though every other wolf was here eating. After 3 straight days of renovation, the upstairs wood flooring was finally done. Tenno gave the stone dolls a pretty specific list of follow-up tasks, and somehow they understood instantly. Next thing he knew, they were huddled together like a team of professional contractors planning their next move. When Tenno stepped outside, he finally ran into Chief again. And wow, the spider had grown huge, like he was back in his prime. Honestly, Tenno was a little intimidated. Chief's body looked way too intense now, but the big guy was overflowing with gratitude after Tenno poured all that mana into him. Chief kept waving his legs around as if explaining something, and as usual, Tenno had no idea what he was trying to say. Still, he was sure of one thing: Chief was smart, friendly, and absolutely not planning to eat him. Seeing Chief reminded Tenno of a problem he'd been ignoring: clothes. His were getting worn out, and since Chief was a spider, surely he had skills with thread, right? So Tenno tried explaining what he needed, and asked if there were any long, fibrous plants he could harvest. Not long after, Tenno headed into the forest with Chai, Kuro, and Chief, mostly because Koa wasn't around, and for the wolves, this was apparently a huge honor. Chai especially looked like he wanted to prove something. That plan lasted about 5 minutes before they all ran into a gigantic caterpillar. Chai and Kuro were instantly disgusted and terrified, which made Chief's proud reveal look hilarious. The giant caterpillar was exactly what he wanted to show Tenno. Something long, harvestable, and perfect for making thread. Chief lifted the caterpillar to demonstrate, but then the thing suddenly sneezed and shot something weird straight at Tenno. Chief and the wolves freaked out and scolded the caterpillar, but Tenno was totally fine. Turned out the weird stuff was actually tough, high-quality thread. Perfect. Chief let out a relieved wiggle, while Chai and Kuro sank into despair because they basically contributed nothing. Eventually, they were assigned the very important job of carrying the giant caterpillar home. When they arrived, Koa was already waiting at the door. Their bond looked even stronger now, especially when Tenno hugged the giant wolf like it was the most natural thing in the world. With the thread source secured, Tenno moved on to the next step. Since the giant caterpillar was now a key part of his textile plan, he decided to convert the unused second floor into a rearing room. He added windows, ventilation, food, a place to sleep for the caterpillar, and even added an automatic cleaning spell into the wood flooring so the room wouldn't turn into a disaster. For the finishing touch, he assigned 2 stone dolls as permanent caretakers for the caterpillars. With that set, the whole thread production plan was basically solved. Watching the dolls work made Tenno wonder how they would actually make the cloth. He took off his worn-out shirt, and the threadworker dolls immediately grabbed it to inspect it. After a quick discussion, they looked confident. They had a solution. Oh, and Tenno also requested a bed. One of the dolls simply grabbed his hand and dragged him to show it off. The bed was sturdy, made of thick wood, and surprisingly well crafted. Even crazier, they'd finished it in half a day. By nightfall, Tenno slept on his new bed with Koa and the others curled around him. And right then, he finally understood. Mattresses are a blessing. A few days passed, and the stone dolls were evolving way faster than Tenno expected. What used to be bare stone walls was now covered with clean wooden panels. They even built actual furniture, dining tables, chairs, and somehow, plates, cups, and chopsticks. It was crazy how just having those made every meal taste better. While watching them work, Tenno noticed there were only 8 dolls around. Maybe the other 2 were still in the caterpillar room, and yep, When he checked, those two had just finished crafting a full outfit from giant caterpillar thread. The shirt was a smooth, elegant light green, paired with simple black pants that looked surprisingly comfy. Tenno crouched down, watching the caterpillar munch on its food, wondering if the thread would change color depending on what it ate. Either way, he suddenly had plenty of spare clothes now, which felt like a luxury. Inside the room, he also noticed a full weaving setup, an actual loom. The stone dolls must have built it, and the threadworker dolls were the ones weaving everything into finished clothes. Honestly, it was amazing. With his mood boosted thanks to his new outfit, Tenno headed into the forest with Koa and the others to hunt for seasonings. He was really hoping to find rock salt or something, and he couldn't help but wonder if this world even had an ocean. They kept walking until they stumbled upon another cave, one Tenno hadn't seen before. It was big and not too far from home. As he checked the entrance, he felt a strange curse lingering deep inside. So with his light spell ready, Tenno and the wolves decided to explore it. The deeper they went, the wider the tunnel became, sloping softly downward. Before long, they heard a faint clacking sound echoing at the end of the passage. When they stepped into the chamber, Tenno froze. A massive room full of ant-like creatures, all drenched in a thick, unsettling curse. And what scared him most? The ants were huge. No wonder Koa growled fiercely beside him. It felt like a showdown between a giant wolf and giant ants. But Tenno wasn't here to stand by and watch. He tried helping with a purification spell, only to panic when it didn't work. Shocked, he cast a purification barrier next, but that also had zero effect. One of the giant ants immediately lunged at him. Koa reacted instantly, stepping forward to shield his master. Thanks to Koa's strike and the barrier's protection, Tenno narrowly avoided getting torn apart. Even after being knocked back, the giant ants kept pushing forward, radiating pure hostility. While Koa and the others fought their hardest to defend him, Tenno focused on observing the ants more closely, their dark patterns, their twisted movements, and the deeper he looked, the more uncomfortable he felt. Tenno and the three wolves were now surrounded. Way too many cursed ants, all of them attacking non-stop. The purification barrier kept them safe, but it didn't lift the curse at all. That alone stressed Tenno out. The black patterns covering these ants looked nothing like the misty curse he saw on Koa and the others before. He wondered, were these ants already taken over completely? No answers came, because the ants just kept slamming into the barrier again and again. With no room to think straight, Tenno made a guess. Maybe two beings were trapped inside each ant, like someone being possessed. If their real consciousness was bound, then the curse might be holding their souls hostage. It was only a hypothesis, but he imagined the ants' true selves locked away, unable to move. So he tried something new, release bind. The moment the spell hit, a ring of light flared across their bodies, burning through the curse. Slowly, the black patterns faded, and the ants collapsed as their awareness returned. One by one, they woke up with their true minds restored, before fainting from exhaustion. Their last memories were grim. The forest was swallowed by black magic. The river vanishes, fruits turning into poison. The forest kings are fighting back, but disappearing one after another. Somehow, none of them could reach the humans responsible for all this chaos. Then, new monsters appeared, and darkness consumed everything. Their vision turned pitch black as the curse wrapped around them, and they feared they'd eventually turn into another being that would destroy the forest. So the ants fled, heading toward the water dragon's nest to beg for help. That was the final thing they remembered. When they opened their eyes again, the first thing they saw was Tenno, gently patting the head of their leader, Onfurumi, the Ant King. Koa, after recovering from shock, finally recognized him. Before long, Onfurumi guided them somewhere deeper inside the cave. Koa assured Tenno it was safe, so they followed for about 30 minutes until they reached a sealed-off area. Tenno cast a light spell, and the truth became clear. The place was drenched in a curse. This was supposed to be the water dragon's dwelling, a sacred lake overflowing with pure magic. But now it was corrupted beyond belief. Annoyed at how much suffering this curse had caused, Tenno didn't hold back. He poured his mana out, visualizing a massive spell, curse absorption and purification spreading across the forest, followed by release bind to free every trapped soul. and then smashing the curse back at its source twice as hard. The moment he cast it, a huge explosion of light erupted across the forest. Even from inside the cave, they felt the shockwave. Tenno stayed focused, cleansing the last traces of corruption inside the cavern, and when it was finally done, the darkness lifted, revealing a once-lost holy lake. Clear water, rich magic, and a breathtaking view shimmered before them. The water dragon's dwelling was finally restored. With the ants finally freed and the curse lifted, the encounter ended with an unexpected reward, an absolutely stunning lake hidden deep inside the cave. None of them noticed the faint bubbles rising from its depths though. Tenno and the wolves had already stepped back outside. Honestly, he never thought a simple search for cooking spices would turn into all that. But he wasn't complaining. As they continued their ingredient hunt, and Furumi quietly tailed them. Well, not exactly quietly. A giant ant's footsteps were impossible to miss, but Tenno didn't mind. While exploring, Tenno stumbled upon a new type of fruit, strange shape, odd color. One bite later, he froze. The fruit tasted salty, exactly the flavor he'd been craving for so long. That discovery alone was enough to make his day. Meanwhile, far away on the human side of the forest, Mizlost, the 4th Chivalric Order's commander, fell down in disbelief. The troops he brought to investigate were acting weird. Their faces stiff, their movements numb, as if they were drowning in some deep despair. Something had clearly happened, but what exactly? Half a month ago, Mizlost was already at his limit. He complained to Ganmirtz about the endless forest investigations, grumbling that he barely had time to rest. To him, it felt like the king wanted the 4th Order to drop dead, piling on absurd workloads without reason. All this fuss was supposedly caused by a cracked magic stone, and when Mizlost checked it himself, the damage turned out to be nothing more than a tiny crack. Normally, magic stones taken from monsters were no bigger than a fingertip. Compared to those, the kingdom's magic stone was massive. A small scratch like that shouldn't matter at all. Ganmirtz agreed, especially since records showed the stone had already been cracked when it was first discovered. Still, this survey felt different. If something went wrong, Mizlost was expected to handle it perfectly. From the beginning, the 4th Chivalric Order was deeply familiar with the forest. It was created to capture and suppress monsters, and over time, forest surveys became routine work. Mizlost himself had entered the forest more times than he could count, and every time it was the same, nothing but ordinary darkness. When he said the forest was normal, Ganmirtz disagreed. He suspected something had changed deep within it. If that were true, only one possibility came to mind for both of them: the kings of the forest. Ganmirtz treated it as a hypothesis, but Mizlost brushed it off, assuring him that everything would be fine before leaving to continue his duties. Not long after, Mizlost began preparing 20 slaves. They would be used for scouting and household labor during the 10-day journey to the forest. Even with all the preparations in place, Ganmirtz's concern lingered in his thoughts. They had known each other for a long time, and Mizlost considered Ganmirtz smart, maybe too smart, the type who tended to overthink. In fact, Ganmirtz was the only knight commander who rarely used slaves at all, seeing them as no different from humans. From the moment they were born, Envelas slaves were bound by a powerful slave crest. They couldn't feel emotions, couldn't resist, and couldn't even speak without orders. Because of that, Mizlost found it hard to view slaves as people. Still, even to him, the cruelty shown by the 5th Order's commander felt excessive. And deep down, mobilizing so many slaves over a single magic stone didn't sit right with him either, though he kept those thoughts to himself. While Ganmirtz chatted casually with his friend, Mizlost was buried in paperwork. Even as his hands moved, his thoughts drifted back to the expedition he was overseeing. People called the 4th Chivalric Order the force that understood the forest best. Yet in truth, they had explored less than 10% of it. The forest itself covered nearly half the world, and no one had ever reached its center. For hundreds of years, since powerful magic was first cast there, rumors spoke of retaliation from the kings of the forest. Still, something didn't add up. That power had somehow crossed the forest's formidable barrier, even though it was said that no force could ever affect a magic stone. On top of that, ever since the stone was discovered, it should have been reinforced by countless sacrifices. Putting all of this together, Ganmir's reached a terrifying conclusion. An existence had appeared, one that surpassed even the kings of the forest. Half a month later, the Fourth Order finally reached the forest. Along the way, they wiped out several monsters with ease. Too much ease. After each kill, some knights even stabbed the corpses repeatedly, drunk on victory, until Mizlos stepped in and stopped them. Something felt off. They had been marching for half a month, yet the number of monsters was far lower than usual. Even stranger, every monster they encountered was an enhanced magic creature, one created by their own kingdom. That realization frustrated Mizlos. He couldn't read the situation at all, and for the first time, he regretted not bringing a mage along. The forest itself felt wrong, dark, heavy. The wind whispered through the trees in an unsettling way. Mizlos wondered if they had taken the wrong path, but deep down, he knew this was the same route they always used. This was the forest they knew, and yet the unease clung to him, growing stronger with every step. Fear slowly seeped into his body. Suddenly, the sound of the forest intensified. The wind grew louder, almost violent. Mizlos immediately ordered the troops to halt and commanded the scout unit to search the area for dangerous creatures and return within an hour. Since the journey was still long and no immediate threat was detected, he decided to set up camp at their current position. The decision made the soldiers uneasy. Mizlos noticed it. He knew his troops were mentally exhausted, while the slaves, strangely, showed no signs of distress. Not long after, a knight he trusted reported back. There were no threats nearby. Mizlos felt a brief sense of relief. Then, disaster struck. A flash of light erupted, engulfing nearly the entire forest. Panic spread instantly across the camp. The soldiers froze in fear, but what truly horrified Mizlos was the sound of the slaves screaming in agony. Light burst from the ground beneath their feet. The soldiers panicked. The slaves ran in all directions. Chaos exploded beyond anything Mizlos had anticipated. He shouted for his men to stay calm. Too late. One by one, his soldiers collapsed. Some lay unconscious, others stared blankly, disoriented. Mizlos' knees weakened as wild thoughts flooded his mind. Was this the Forest King's retaliation? But there were no wounds, no blood. Then came the final report. The slaves were gone, or more precisely, they had escaped. Only one explanation made sense. The slave crest had been destroyed, and Mizlos knew with chilling certainty that he had to report this to the king immediately. Deep in the forest, Tenno headed home with the giant ant he had saved earlier. The creature clearly intended to follow him, so Tenno figured it deserved a name. Its scarlet-colored body made the choice easy. He called it Shuri. Not long after, they reached the house and were greeted by the wolves, who were bored out of their minds after guarding the place with the golem. They complained loudly about how the golem kept kicking them out whenever they tried to bring prey inside. They were so busy ranting that they didn't even notice Anfarumi, Shuri, walking right behind Tenno. That changed fast when Chief suddenly charged in from afar at full speed, blocking Shuri's path and demanding to know why an ant was here. Apparently, the two insect monsters had never gotten along. Luckily, Tenno stepped in before things got ugly. With their master's command, they agreed to a temporary truce. From Koa's point of view, it was impressive. Bringing together two beings who once hated each other was no small feat. Then again, Fenrir and Phoenix weren't exactly on friendly terms either, but that was a problem for another day. Once inside, Tenno noticed the ceiling had finally been installed. Before he could relax, the dolls immediately swarmed him with requests, planks, squared lumber, and all kinds of materials. He decided to deal with that tomorrow. Right now, he had something more important in mind: making salt. For his first experiment, he used 5 salted fruits and stored the rest in the fridge. As a test, he applied a kind of time freeze spell to the vegetable storage, and it worked surprisingly well. For the salt itself, he covered a silver ore bowl with cloth, cut the fruit in half, squeezed the juice into the fabric, and collected it in the bowl. He then carefully boiled the liquid, making sure it didn't burn. 2 hours later, the juice had fully crystallized into salt. Only a small amount, but still a success. Excited by the result, Tenno rushed to craft a proper container, forging a luxurious salt holder from hardened gold ore. Watching from the side, the wolves could only stare in disbelief once again at their master's absurd ability to freely shape not just mithril, but even orichalcum. After finishing the salt container, Tenno wasted no time putting his new salt to use. He decided to cook a proper steak. First, he lightly salted the meat and added some aromatic herbs. After letting it sit for a bit, he skewered the steak and grilled it directly over the fire. But he wasn't done yet. The partially cooked meat was wrapped in cabbage and left to rest. For the final touch, he browned the surface once more, and the steak was complete. Tenno sliced into it and took a bite. As he chewed slowly, his eyes widened. The taste was completely different from before. This time, the meat was insanely good. His satisfied expression instantly caught the wolves' attention, and they began staring at the steak with obvious hunger. Even though Tenno said he would cook theirs separately, he eventually gave them a few pieces. While enjoying the moment, a thought crossed his mind. What about Karen? Was the little bird eating properly too? When Tenno looked toward Karen's usual spot, the bird was gone, already flying somewhere in the distance. Time passed, but Karen didn't return, and unease started creeping in. He tried to stay positive, reminding himself that Karen had lived in the wild before, but her tiny body made him worry all over again. Sensing his concern, Koa tried to reassure him, letting out a low growl as if to say Karen would be fine. The bird was always close to Tenno, so she had probably absorbed some of his magic too. Hearing Koa's growl, Tenno misunderstood and thought the wolf was worried as well, pulling him into a tight hug. After that, Tenno decided to calm himself by working. That's when he realized tanning leather was way harder than he expected. First, he had to remove the meat and fat from the hide. He tried using magic, but it exploded instead. Controlling magic output was still tricky for him. After separating it properly, he washed the hide in a large pot of water, but the water quickly turned pitch black. The hide began to shrink and reek of rot. When that step was done, he moved on to drying, but no matter what he tried, the leather always hardened and became brittle. In the end, Tenno had to admit it. He knew absolutely nothing about leather tanning. He didn't know where he went wrong, but he kept trying anyway, imagining the hide someday becoming a soft futon mattress, a plush rug, or even shoes and small tools if he managed to get it right. Off to the side, Koa and the others quietly watched their master at work. Not long after, one of the wolves returned with fresh prey. Lately, Tenno had noticed something strange. The wolves' appetites were getting bigger and bigger. With that in mind, he stopped his work and prepared food for them. It wasn't just the wolves either. Chief came back from hunting as well, and ever since Shuri joined, the creature had grown noticeably larger. Koa himself had grown massive too, almost the size of a car. With enough prey gathered, Tenno decided to make something special: ham. He got completely absorbed in the process, and by the time he noticed, a whole day had passed. That's when he realized he had forgotten the hide he left soaking in the pot. The water had turned brown and muddy, and there was nothing he could do except dry it. Strangely, this time the leather felt different. It was softer than usual. Confused, Tenno thought back and realized he had also left the wooden stick he normally used for stirring in the pot. That was when it clicked. Wood resin. He had finally found the missing piece. Excited, Tenno asked the dolls to gather large amounts of wood so he could experiment with resin-based tanning. Up until now, he had only ever called them things like number 1 or number 3, and he left the tanning process entirely to them. The dolls worked fast, too fast, honestly. They tested 3 different resin-to-water ratios, dried the hides, and even stretched them on frames to prevent too much shrinkage. Watching this, Tenno couldn't help but wonder how the dolls were outperforming him, even though he was the one who created them. The dolls didn't stop there. They wanted to try even more experiments, but there wasn't enough space in front of the cave. In the end, Tenno told number 1 to cut down nearby trees to make more room. He felt a little guilty. Those trees had probably been standing there for hundreds of years, but he went along with it anyway. Tenno cut the logs into planks and carried them to the 3rd floor and the 1st basement. He lost himself in the work, watching the dolls happily haul planks around, until he suddenly realized he had gone overboard. He had cut down far more trees than he intended. Deciding to ignore that for now, Tenno went inside the house and froze. Brand new furniture filled the room. A comfortable lounge chair stood front and center. There was even a hanging chair, exactly the kind he had dreamed of back in high school. A wooden bathtub had been built beautifully, and the stair railings and floorboards now had non-slip features. The toilet door still wasn't finished, but Tenno was more than satisfied. He smiled, already imagining how surprised Karen would be when she came back. Meanwhile, far away in the slowly recovering water dragon's dwelling, Karen was there. Just what was the little bird doing in that place? The next morning, Tenno headed back to the land he had cleared the day before. He still needed to deal with the tree stumps, but when he arrived, they were all gone, every single one. As he walked around in confusion, he quickly discovered the reason. Ants. A whole colony had dragged the stumps away and carried them into their small nest underground. It was the first time Tenno realized there was an ant nest here. Before he could react, Shurai appeared and gestured for him to come inside. Tenno felt like he was inviting him in, but he politely refused, explaining that he was just passing by. Looking around, he noticed the ants digging neatly into the ground. The holes they were working on were the exact spots where the stumps used to be. The work was surprisingly clean and well organized, and it sparked an idea. This place could become a farm. If that worked, he wouldn't need to search for vegetables anymore. Potatoes especially came to mind. With that thought, Tenno tried to describe what potatoes looked like to Shuri, and asked if he had seen anything similar in the forest. After understanding, Shuri left to search for them. Tenno stayed behind, now fully committed to turning this area into farmland. His next goal was fertilizer. He dug a hole in a shaded corner and reinforced it with a wooden frame, with help from the dolls. Then he layered it with food scraps, fallen leaves, and dry grass. Once it was full, he stomped the soil down, covered everything properly, and sprinkled a bit of water. Now, all that was left was to wait. That was when Tenno remembered something from his childhood, how he once opened his father's compost out of curiosity and found it crawling with insects. An idea clicked. He stretched out his hand and channeled magic, using the opposite of vegetable preservation. He called it Accelerate Time. The spell worked perfectly, speeding up the composting process. When it started to smell and release steam, he knew it was ready. He dug it up and mixed it into the soil, repeating the process again and again. Elsewhere, the wolves were out hunting, clearly enjoying themselves. In the middle of it, bright glowing feathers drifted through the air. Koa immediately growled. He recognized that presence. Back at the field, Tenno finished mixing the compost and stood up. When he turned around, he froze. A bird with beautiful, glowing feathers stood nearby. He gasped, but the moment it chirped, he knew. It was Karen. Overjoyed, Karen rushed toward him, which startled Tenno for a second. He didn't mean any harm. He was just shocked and relieved that Karen was safe, and somehow even more beautiful than before. Not long after, Koa ran over and quickly realized that the large glowing bird was Karen. She wasn't alone. Karen asked Tenno to take care of a strange creature, something like a soft lump with 2 tiny wings. With her current strength, she couldn't do anything for it herself. As Tenno looked at the creature, he felt the pressure of a curse. Without hesitation, he purified it with magic. The creature began to shine, and Koa instantly recognized it. It was a water dragon. Karen had brought it here on purpose, hoping the forest would recover with his presence. Among all kings of beasts, dragons were divine beings who ruled the 5 elements that formed the forest itself. Because of them, the forest had been protected from human invasion for ages, but before anyone truly noticed, the dragons vanished. Now, the rebirth of the water dragon brought a faint but real hope that the forest's waters could recover. Dragons had an enormous influence on nature, and if they ever regained their full power, the forest would be revitalized in no time. That hope pushed Koa the Fenrir and Karen the Phoenix, once natural enemies, to work together, even if a bit of old pride still lingered between them. Tenno, however, had no idea that the fluffy, ball-like creature was actually a water dragon. He simply stared at it in awe, wondering why such an important being looked like a bundle of wool. It felt soft and warm in his hands, so without thinking too much, he named it Fluffy. The name was surprisingly well received. not just by the water dragon, but also by Koa and Karen. While they casually chatted, Cheyenne and the other wolves returned, carrying prey larger than their own bodies. Tenno had always been curious about how they managed that, but what stood out more was how incredibly healthy the animals around him had become. It felt strange, yet somehow normal. After all, this was a parallel world. With Karen back, Tenno decided to cook a large amount of meat. As usual, he cleaned and skinned the prey, but this time he noticed something odd: a stone lodged near the heart. At first, he wondered if it was some kind of disease, like a kidney stone, but not all animals had one. The stone itself was unfamiliar, and when he tried to purify it with magic, nothing happened. Curious, but not urgent, Tenno set it aside for later. Right now, he had something else in mind. He had prepared a new stove using silver ore, eager to test an idea. He placed several round-shaped mountain stones onto it. These stones could retain magic longer and seemed resistant to heat, so he treated them like charcoal. By heating them with magic, he successfully created a makeshift grill. Using skewers made of gold ore, he pierced meat and vegetables, grilling them over the stones. The mouth-watering aroma made Karen start drooling. She clearly preferred cooked meat. Meanwhile, Koa approached with a full belly after eating raw meat, which made Tenno wonder whether Fluffy could eat meat as well. After adding salt and lemon as a final touch, Tenno took a bite of his barbecue. His face relaxed in satisfaction. It was genuinely good. The success of the meal sparked a new thought in his mind. Maybe it was time to create more cooking tools. While eating, Tenno suddenly remembered the small stones he had found earlier. No matter how he looked at them, they seemed completely ordinary. But the moment he channeled magic into one, the magic spread through the stone instantly. That shocked him. Until now, mountain stones were the easiest and most efficient tools for magic, but their effects always faded once the stored magic ran out. Finding a stone that could spread magic immediately caught Tenno's interest. Curious, he poured more magic into it, feeling that the stone could probably hold a large amount. He was right. The stone changed color once enough magic flowed through it. When he infused all the small stones, each one turned a different color. Some became green, others scarlet, aquamarine, or blue. Tenno guessed the colors were tied to the type of monster they came from. Still, no matter how impressive the stones looked, he had no idea what to actually do with them. Just as he was about to dismiss them as useless, Koa suddenly let out a low growl, as if trying to show him something. Koa took a deep breath, and flames burst from his mouth. Tenno froze in shock at the sudden magic. Then, Koa spat out the stone near his feet, and picked up a red one. That was when it clicked. This was how Koa used fire breath. Tenno's brain lagged for a moment. Honestly, he didn't fully understand what Koa was trying to explain, but he came to one conclusion. The stones were meant to amplify magic, so he tested it. Holding one of the stones, Tenno cast a water spell. In an instant, high-pressure water blasted out of the small cup on his barbecue stove, completely putting out the fire. Well, at least by pure accident, he had just discovered an incredibly convenient item. The next day, remember when Tenno asked Shuri to look for edible vegetables that grow underground? Today, Shuri finally brought them back, confident they were safe to eat. He explained that the vegetables could even be eaten raw and tasted pretty good. But the moment he cut one open, Tenno suddenly grabbed all of them and rushed straight to the field. What he wanted to do was prepare the soil and mix in the fertilizer he had made earlier. To be honest, the only thing he ever helped with was making compost, so he had no idea if it would work. Still, trying was better than doing nothing. Since the soil condition was already decent, he decided to shape it into ridges. After a while, the familiar raised rows of farmland slowly took form. For the potato-like vegetables Shuri brought, Tenno cut them in half and planted them directly into the soil. He didn't even know what the plant actually was, and part of him worried it might be cursed. Still, he chose to trust Shuri and kept planting. Before long, all the vegetables were fully buried. The ridged soil now looked more like a proper farm than an empty field. Meanwhile, at the corner of the garden, Shuri couldn't understand why his master was burying vegetables he had just picked. Koa assumed it was some kind of storage method. In short, none of them actually understood farming. After finishing the planting, Tenno started wondering what season it was. the air felt slightly warmer compared to when he first arrived. With such a wide field and weeds already growing, he knew he'd need help. That's when he decided to create stone dolls again. Slowly, he shaped the stones into humanoid figures. Their purpose was simple: weeding, watering, fertilizing, and pest control. To make that work, he embedded small magic stones into their bodies. After testing the stones yesterday, he had begun to understand their functions. Red stones boosted fire magic, blue stones enhanced water magic, and green stones were still a mystery, though they seemed connected to nature. As a finishing touch, Tenno poured a large amount of mana into each stone doll. Moments later, the garden care dolls began to move, and when Tenno greeted them, they immediately lined up and greeted him back. With the garden and field finally taken care of, Tenno moved on to his next plan: fishing. He headed to the lake he had purified earlier with the wolves. His goal was simple. He wanted to make soy sauce. Sadly, soybeans were completely out of his reach, but fish? That was doable. If he could catch some, he could at least try making fish sauce. From what he remembered watching on TV, it was just fish fermented with salt. Simple enough, in theory. This time, Fluffy tagged along to the lake. The small creature looked unusually excited, almost like it was trying to tell Tenno something. Tenno cast his fishing line and waited, looking confident and relaxed. Everything felt peaceful, until Fluffy suddenly shot forward at insane speed and dove straight into the lake. A moment later, the water exploded. A massive fish burst out of the lake, shocking Tenno and the wolves alike. It was huge, packed with sharp teeth, and clearly not something you could catch with a fishing rod. But somehow, there it was. Fluffy had caught it. The proud look on the little creature's face said everything. It was clearly showing off. Thanks to that, Tenno ended up with a fish at least 10 times bigger than anything he had expected. He thanked Fluffy sincerely. Now making fish sauce was guaranteed. Everything had gone perfectly. Excited, Tenno couldn't wait to return home and start experimenting. But far away, deep within the forest, a very different scene was unfolding. In the human kingdom of Envilas, tension filled the air as Mizlost, commander of the Fourth Order, stood before the king to deliver his expedition report. Before that, let's rewind to a moment earlier, when Ganmir's noticed something was wrong. From his office window, he saw the Fourth Night Order returning far earlier than expected. Mizlost's face looked drained and tense. It hadn't even been a full month since they departed, so Ganmir's immediately sensed that something had gone off the rails. Not long after, a guard entered his room and announced an order for all commanders to gather in the audience chamber. The tension peaked when Mizlost began reporting on the expedition. The king's advisor immediately questioned whether he knew what caused the magic stone to crack. Mizlost's thoughts spiraled. He was a warrior who had always carried out the kingdom's orders without fearing death, yet he felt deeply frustrated, especially knowing that a single report in that very room could decide someone's punishment. Carefully, Mizlost explained that when his unit entered the forest, they suddenly collided with a wall of light. When he regained consciousness, every slave was gone. Before he could explain further, the advisor erupted in anger upon hearing that the slaves had escaped instead of dying. The king himself looked furious, stood up, and stormed out of the chamber, declaring the entire situation insane. Once the king left, the advisor ordered the Fourth Night Order to remain on standby until further orders. For now, Mizlost felt relieved that nothing worse happened. That relief didn't last long. Gamel, the commander of the Fifth Order, mocked him as a coward before leaving. Only Ganmir's stayed behind to comfort him. He was simply grateful that Mizlost had returned alive after facing something no one could truly understand. Mizlost then asked Ganmir's what he thought about the forest. On the surface, it looked ordinary, yet the fear he felt was overwhelming, as if the forest itself had rejected him. Truthfully, Mizlost had believed he would die the moment he hit that wall of light. Still, despite the slaves escaping, none of the soldiers suffered any abnormalities. That detail unsettled Ganmir's. He wondered if this incident was a warning. He suggested that perhaps a being even stronger than the Forest King existed. It was only speculation, but considering the sheer power involved, if the forest intended to resist the kingdom, it could have done so much sooner. which meant there was a real possibility that something far more terrifying than the Forest King was lurking deep within the forest. Meanwhile, on the other side, the king couldn't calm his rage. Slaves escaping made absolutely no sense to him. If that really happened, then something had to be wrong with the slave crest, something reinforced by the magic stone itself. He refused to accept that idea. For hundreds of years, he had offered countless sacrifices to strengthen that magic stone. There was no way it could fail now. Standing by the window, the king stared at the tower supporting the barrier around Envelas. The barrier was still active, still holding. His thoughts shifted to another possibility, the enhanced beasts they had sent into the forest. But could either beasts or slaves really regain their consciousness just because of a magic stone? That question mattered more than anything. After all, the magic stone was the key. Through it, one could draw power from the forest, and with that power, rule the world. Until now, the king had followed the god's will without question. By siphoning the forest's magic, he not only gained strength, but also prevented the forest beasts from rising against him. And for 10 long years, there had been no resistance. That was why this sudden disturbance infuriated him. Everything was almost finished. Just a little more, and it would all be over. The king drew his sword in fury and swung it down, demanding answers from the empty room. Why now? Why at this moment? A single slave lost their life in the aftermath. When his anger finally cooled, the king turned his full attention toward the forest. His resolve hardened. If the forest refused to obey, then he would burn it to the ground. While the king of Envelas burned in rage, Tenno was busy chasing a completely different dream: fish sauce. The fish had already been cleaned, head removed, guts and blood washed away. Using his new knife made from silver ore, Tenno cut the meat into smaller pieces. Next came the salt. Since salt was still a precious resource, he only used about 20% of what he had. He carefully coated the fish, then packed it tightly into a pot, layer after layer, leaving no gaps. Once it was full, he added another layer of salt on top. Then came the most important step: fermentation. Normally it would take 1 to 2 years, but of course, Tenno had magic. He accelerated time by 3 months. When he checked the result, the liquid had thickened slightly, and a distinct fermented smell started to form. Not bad. He kept experimenting, adjusting the time flow again and again, while Koa and Shuri watched curiously from the side. After several trials, Tenno finally found the sweet spot. The smell hit him first, strong, sharp, definitely stinky, but somehow it felt right. Carefully, he filtered the liquid through a cloth. What came out was a clear, light brown liquid. Beautiful. After everything it took to make, every single drop felt incredibly valuable. Tenno dipped a finger in and tasted it. Salty, yes, but also rich, deep, and packed with flavor. His eyes lit up. Without wasting another second, he stopped the fermentation and moved on to cooking. On the grill, leftover fish meat started to sizzle. The pieces had been preserved earlier, ready for moments like this. Since he expected Karen to return soon, he prepared some portions for her too. He flipped the fish as it cooked, then brushed it lightly with the fish sauce. The aroma spread instantly. Fragrant, savory, irresistible. Finally, it was done. Tenno picked up a piece with his chopsticks and took a bite, and froze. His eyes widened. It was insanely good. Salt alone could never create this kind of depth, this kind of aroma, and somehow, in this other world, the flavor felt even more intense. Before he realized it, he was eating faster and faster, until he suddenly felt something behind him, a strange, warm breeze. He slowly turned his head. The wolves were right there, breathing heavily, staring at the grilled fish. Koa and the others were clearly curious. Tenno sighed, then gave them some. As he prepared a portion for Karen, a sharp cracking sound pulled his attention away. Shuri. The giant ant had already grabbed a piece and seemed to love it. Tenno barely had time to relax before another surprise. Chief had somehow started grilling fish on his own, and was even seasoning it with the fish sauce. At that point, Tenno just gave up trying to question anything. After all the chaos, he finally sat down and enjoyed his meal. This time quietly, with Fluffy beside him. Still, one thing became clear. From now on, he probably wouldn't be able to eat in peace anymore. The beasts around him were getting hungrier, for some reason. That night, after a long day, Tenno lay down on his soft, comfortable bed. Half asleep, he murmured to himself, still amazed at how much the dolls had evolved. At this point, they were starting to feel less like simple golems, and more like a full agricultural core. With that thought lingering in his mind, Tenno slowly drifted off to sleep, wondering what kind of changes he'd see in the fields tomorrow. Tenno thought it was going to be a normal morning, nothing special, but the moment he stepped into the fields, something already felt off. One of the dolls walked up to him and handed him a new set of clothes. The quality had improved so much that it actually caught him off guard. Then he looked around. The ants and the dolls were already working. So naturally Tenno offered to help, but they refused. Even the leather drying process didn't need him anymore. And just like that, Tenno realized something. He had nothing to do. For a moment, he just stood there, feeling kind of useless. But before that feeling could sink in, Chief and Shuri suddenly rushed toward him. They were carrying something, a strange white object. They lifted it up, gesturing toward him, clearly asking for something. Tenno didn't get it at first, but then it clicked. They wanted his mana. Still unsure, Tenno slowly poured a small amount into the object, and then, crack. The surface split open, and what came out next made his whole body freeze. Tiny creatures, baby ants, baby spiders, those things were eggs. Tenno stared at them for a second, then screamed. Loud. His voice was so loud that it echoed through the entire forest. Sometime later, Tenno walked through the forest, still embarrassed. He kept apologizing over and over, saying he didn't mean to scream that loud. He felt bad for Shuri and Chief, but yeah, insects just weren't his thing. As he walked, he glanced at Chai, who was carrying Chief, wondering if the wolf was okay. Because honestly, Chai didn't look like a fan of bugs either. Still, it had been a while since Tenno went out like this with Koa, so he smiled and gently patted Koa's fur. Then, he tried offering the same to Chai, but Chai turned his head away. Tenno thought he got rejected, but in reality, Chai actually wanted it too. He just didn't know how to show it. They kept walking for a while, until they found a cave. The moment they stepped inside, everything changed. The air felt heavy, hostile, dangerous. Tenno instantly became alert, and then he saw them, a pack of direwolves, still under a curse. Meanwhile, far away in the kingdom of Envelas, inside the royal throne hall, knights and mages stood in perfect formation. The king stepped forward and gave his command. 25 mages would accompany the 2nd and 5th Night Orders. Their mission? To wipe out the monsters in the forest. In the king's eyes, he had already shown enough mercy. He had spared the beasts, even gave them a purpose for the kingdom. But now, that mercy was gone. Their repeated rebellion had crossed the line. So, he made his decision. He would burn the entire forest to the ground. Most of the knights stood proud, full of confidence. But one of them, Ganmir's, felt something was wrong. Was this really going to work? Sure, the mages were powerful, and the 5th Order had crushed monsters before. But still, what if they weren't facing the kings of the forest, but something stronger? Back in the cave, the direwolves attacked. Fast, wild, ferocious. But they couldn't break through the barrier Tenno had already set. Watching them up close, Tenno noticed something. Their condition. It reminded him of Shuri. Chai tried to call out to them, trying to bring them back, but it didn't work. Desperate, Chai turned to Tenno. Tenno clenched his fist, and quietly, bind. The spell activated instantly. The direwolves froze. Not a single one of them could move. Without wasting a second, Tenno cast purification magic. Light spread across their bodies, and just like that, the curse was gone. The direwolves collapsed to the ground, completely drained. Their bodies were thin, weak, barely holding on. Tenno quickly used healing magic to stabilize them, but seeing their condition, something inside him snapped. Anger. Whoever did this, he wouldn't forgive them. At that exact same moment, back in Envelas, the king stood proudly, giving out orders, ready to show the forest just how terrifying his kingdom could be. But he didn't notice it. A massive wave of magic, rushing straight toward the kingdom. Something was coming, and this time, Envelas might not be ready for what's about to happen. The forest didn't just grow, it leveled up in a matter of days. After Tenno doubled the agricultural core, everything started changing fast. Before he even realized it, a small lake had formed near the fields, probably thanks to the ants digging non-stop. And honestly, Fluffy was living its best life, flying low over the water as it had just discovered a personal playground. Then suddenly, Fluffy scooped up some lake water with its power and dropped it right in front of Tenno, like it was trying to say something important. Too bad. Tenno had no clue. So naturally, he misunderstood and thought Fluffy wanted the lake to be bigger. And just like that, he started chopping down trees one by one to expand it. He kept going until his energy completely crashed. Exhausted, he headed back home, only to be greeted by the spiders, who immediately guided him to the storage room. Every empty rack filled completely. Watching the dolls working non-stop, Tenno noticed the spiders scratching at the walls. That was their way of saying, "We need more space." So he used his magic to stop time as the air turned cold. And the moment everything froze, the dolls moved at insane speed. They carried wooden blocks, built new shelves, and organized everything in what felt like seconds. Food supplies were neatly stored, everything perfectly arranged. When Tenno tried to help, he got rejected, straight up. Yeah, that stung. Feeling kind of useless, he decided to go hunting with Koa instead. They moved through the forest together. At first, Tenno struggled to keep up with Koa's speed, but eventually he adapted. Time passed quickly, and before they knew it, they had reached the edge of the barrier. Tenno started thinking about expanding it, but Koa suddenly stopped. A low growl escaped him. Something was wrong. Then it appeared, a wyvern flying above them, radiating pure hostility. Koa reacted instantly, launching an attack, but missed. Not far away, Karen had just returned early and spotted the wyvern too. It was rare for a creature like that to show up here. At first, she didn't think much of it, until she saw her master below. Then, everything changed. She rushed toward him at full speed, knowing how dangerous that thing was. Wyverns had incredibly tough skin. Normal attacks wouldn't even scratch them. This was bad. She just hoped she'd make it in time. But that worry turned out to be pointless. In the next moment, Tenno casually used his magic, and the wyvern's head was gone, just like that. Karen and Koa froze in shock. Even Tenno himself looked confused. He didn't expect that at all. It was pure reflex, and somehow his magic had sliced through the air itself. With the wyvern down, Tenno simply asked Koa if it was edible. Then he greeted Karen, who was still frozen mid-air, like nothing insane had just happened. Back at home, Koa told Chai to take some of the wyvern meat too. Chai hesitated, but accepted it happily. Tenno had been a little worried about him. He thought Chai might leave Koa's pack once he found his old comrades again. But maybe that wasn't something he needed to worry about. Because back then, when Tenno encountered a pack of direwolves, Chai's former companions, something unexpected happened. He lost control, anger took over, and without meaning to, he unleashed a full-powered scream, sending the curse back with overwhelming force. He didn't know what happened after that. Even now, he still wonders, who cast that curse and where are they hiding? The moment the king of Envelas gave the order to burn the forest, something answered. A bolt of lightning suddenly struck right in front of him. It didn't hit, but it was close enough to make even the king pause. Still, he refused to believe it meant anything. In his mind, his kingdom was untouchable, protected by an absolute barrier that had never failed for hundreds of years. News of the attack spread across the palace in an instant. Mizlost, who wasn't there at the time, was shocked. The lightning had appeared right in front of the king, but was it stopped by the barrier? He praised the king's powerful defense, but Ganmir's didn't look convinced. Something about this didn't sit right with him. After that incident, the king immediately sent troops into the forest. At the same time, he redirected the mages, who were supposed to head to the magic forest, instead ordering them to stack multiple barriers around the magic stone room. Then, he locked himself inside. That alone was enough to make both Ganmir's and Mizlost uneasy, because this was a king who had never been attacked, not once, for centuries. And yet now, he was acting afraid. For Ganmir's, one detail kept bothering him. The barrier protecting Envelas was still intact, which meant that the attack didn't come from inside the kingdom. It came from beyond its borders. So the real question was simple. Did it actually miss? Meanwhile, deep in the forest, Tenno had something way more important on his mind. Dinner. After the dolls casually dismantled the wyvern's corpse, Tenno ended up with a ridiculous amount of meat. So, naturally, he decided to grill it. But there was a problem. Wyvern meat looked tough, so he soaked it in fruit juice first, hoping to soften it. Koa, who had eaten wyvern before, was already excited, but this time was different. The sweet, fragrant smell coming from Tenno's cooking was something he had never experienced before. Then came the sauce, a weird but genius mix. Caramel as a substitute for onions, a bit of fruit extract, and fish sauce. Tenno dipped the grilled meat into it and took a bite. Yeah, it was addictive, the kind of flavor that instantly made him crave rice and fresh eggs. But there was one disappointing truth. It didn't taste like chicken, and somehow that only made him crave fried chicken even more. Then it hit him. He remembered a survival show, something about extracting oil from camellia seeds. That thought alone got him excited. If he could make oil, fried food was possible. While Tenno got lost in that idea, Karen and the wolves were busy fighting over the wyvern meat. They already had their own portions, but for some reason, things still turned chaotic really fast. A few moments later, Tenno came to a conclusion. Fried chicken might be impossible for now, but fried pumpkin? That could work. First, he needed oil, so he gathered all kinds of seeds and started experimenting, crushing them with magic to see which ones could produce usable oil. The ants and spiders kept bringing him more samples, helping non-stop. Then, finally, he found it, a fruit with seeds that actually worked. When he asked the baby ant and baby spider where it came from, they guided him straight to it without any trouble. A large, fertile tree full of those fruits. There was just one problem. Most of it was outside the barrier. A few days ago, when Tenno wanted to expand the barrier, Koa strongly opposed it for some reason. But this time, Tenno wasn't backing down, because honestly, he really wanted fried food. Using his magic, Tenno observed the forest. This time, he planned to expand the barrier 3 to 5 times larger than before. Who knows? There might be other interesting places out there too. Even though Koa and Chai tried to stop him, Tenno had already decided he would expand the barrier and at the same time cleanse the curse in that area. Back in Envilas, Ganmir's expression turned serious. Based on his calculations, it would take 10 days to reach the forest entrance from the royal palace, and months more to reach its center. Mizlost was confused at first, but then Ganmir said it clearly. That place was where the attack came from. He believed it was connected to the king's order to burn the forest. And just like that, two opposing views clashed. The king believed the attack never breached his barrier. To him, it was nothing more than a desperate final attempt from monsters. But Ganmir's wasn't so sure. He began to doubt whether Envilas was truly as safe as they believed. Confidence versus unease. And then, the answer came. Not from words, but from the forest itself. Deep within it, Tenno activated his magic and returned the curse to its source. Not just once, but twice as strong. What followed was chaos. Inside the magic stone room, energy began to overflow violently. The king was visibly shaken as the magical power spiraled out of control. Because this wasn't just one curse being returned, it was everything. The curse in the soil, the rivers, the lakes, all of it came back at once. Lightning began to form above the magic stone, striking wildly in every direction. The entire room turned into a storm of magic, and it didn't stop. Tenno continued purifying everything, from the roots beneath the ground to the very tips of the leaves, before finally casting a single word: return. The moment the purification ended, so did the disaster. The storm vanished, but not without damage. Several mages were left injured from the backlash. The king of Envilas stood there, drenched in cold sweat. For the first time in a long time, he felt fear. Meanwhile, far away in the forest, Tenno simply felt satisfied. Two completely different worlds, two completely different outcomes. The forest didn't just expand, it exploded outward. When Koa went to check, the barrier had grown way beyond what should have been possible in a single day. A few days earlier, the wolves and the others had already felt it. That overwhelming surge of energy. It confused them, worried them. But the dolls, they acted as if nothing had happened. And then Tenno came back, completely fine, standing there, maintaining a barrier that size was no big deal. That alone left Koa in quiet awe. Later that day, Tenno returned home and immediately felt something was off. The moment he stepped forward, he realized he was standing on a huge wooden deck. He walked inside and the surprises didn't stop. The front door had been replaced with a high-quality sliding door. Every single room now had proper doors too. Before he could even process it, one of the dolls grabbed him and dragged him downstairs. And there it was. The dolls were busy building frames for more sliding doors. Then it clicked. They needed glass. They were asking Tenno to finish it. But that wasn't all. They pulled him into the living room next, pointing at the wall, even drawing outlines on it. Their intention was clear: break this part. So Tenno started dismantling the wooden wall, piece by piece. For a moment, a random thought crossed his mind. Could the dolls actually use magic too? Nah, didn't matter right now. After that, he checked on their other work and froze. They had already finished building the oil press. With that machine and his magic, Tenno could finally produce his own cooking oil. So, of course, he tested it. And yeah, everything fried tasted amazing. No hesitation. He used up all the seeds he had left, though the oil press still needed a few tweaks. Then he fried eggplant. Simple, but the taste, incredible, completely satisfying. As he was eating, the wolves suddenly surrounded him, drawn in by the smell. That made Tenno pause for a second, wondering if fried vegetables were even okay for them. In the end, he gave them some anyway. Right in the middle of that moment, Chai approached him, grateful. Because thanks to Tenno, all of Chai's companions had fully recovered. Some of them were still cautious. After all, trusting a human wasn't easy. But the moment Tenno handed them freshly fried food, that hesitation disappeared. Watching from a distance, Tenno smiled. Chai and the others clearly loved the pumpkin-like vegetable. Since they were all gathered, Tenno decided to do something else. Give them names. The males became Chaya and Chata. The one with the white nose, Charu. The females were named Sao, Sasa, and Sammy. And the one with red spots and red eyes, Kisa. Tenno matched their names with the kanji style of Chai's name. And honestly, he looked pretty proud of himself. A little later, Tenno stepped out onto the terrace. The wide wooden deck stretched out before him, warm and peaceful. Surrounded by animals and dolls, the atmosphere felt perfect. For a moment, he just relaxed and reviewed everything he had accomplished so far. Fried food, achieved. But it still wasn't enough. He wanted a proper iron frying pan, which led to a bigger problem. Where do you even find iron? He didn't have a magnet or anything that could help detect it. But as he kept thinking, something clicked, a memory. There was a magnet, one that had been with him this whole time, his wallet, the one that somehow came with him from Earth. Finding iron became Tenno's new goal. Every time he stepped outside, he said he was searching for iron ore. But in reality, he was just sticking his magnet onto random rocks like a guy hoping for luck. Still, he liked knowing the magnet came from his wallet, a tiny piece of Earth, still useful here. The problem was, this forest was way too vast. At first, he searched only inside the barrier, but even that area was filled with countless caves. It made him wonder if this place used to be a volcanic region, and for some reason he couldn't even enter the deepest parts of the mountains. 5 days passed, nothing. He found plenty of strange rocks, just not the one he wanted. Even so, he wasn't tired yet. But since he had already hunted along the way, it was time to head back. Then, on the way home, they found a cave. Inside it, something strange. Crystal-like stones, transparent, almost like glass. At first, Tenno thought it was ice, but it wasn't cold. Then he saw it. Something trapped inside. A small squirrel-like creature, glowing in a reddish-green color, is frozen within the crystal. Tenno wasn't sure if it was even alive. So, he purified the crystal, and instantly, crack. The crystal shattered, the creature dropped to the ground, and after a moment, it moved. It slowly sat up, looking around like it had just woken up from a long sleep. Tenno couldn't look away. It was ridiculously cute. He felt relieved when Koa didn't seem interested in eating it. But then, Kisa suddenly became alert. Koa wondered if direwolves just didn't like the smell of squirrels. Kisa didn't mind one. The problem was, there wasn't just one. The little creature started leading them to more. Dozens of squirrels, all trapped in crystals. Without hesitation, Tenno freed them, and that's when things went wrong. In an instant, he got swarmed, completely surrounded by squirrels. Inside, Tenno was panicking hard. The wolves noticed immediately and started barking, driving the swarm away. Thanks to Koa, Tenno barely escaped that chaos. Not long after, they continued heading home, with one squirrel casually sitting on Tenno's shoulder. Back to the iron problem, he had spent the whole day searching, 4 different locations, still nothing. But Tenno already knew this wouldn't be easy, so instead of rushing, he decided to take it slow. And then, about 15 minutes away from home, he found a familiar cave. It was the same cave where Kisa and Chai's pack were first discovered. He hadn't checked it before, didn't think it was necessary. So, he was about to leave, when, suddenly, click. His magnet stuck to the cave wall. After all that searching, the iron ore had been right here the whole time. Not long after, Karen returned, complaining to Koa that she still couldn't find any dragons today. But the moment she saw the Ratatosk, sitting on Tenno's shoulder, her mood instantly flipped. Then, she released a burst of intimidation. The squirrels panicked and scattered immediately. Yeah, that might have been a bit overkill. With the squirrels now part of the group, Tenno started realizing something. The number of creatures around him was growing fast. Could they all actually live together peacefully? When Tenno entered the house, something felt off. The dolls were sitting neatly in place, too neatly. That wasn't normal. Confused, he stepped outside toward the field, and then he saw it. The crops. They had grown, not just grown, thrived. Vegetables were healthy, large, and ready. Tenno froze for a second. Wait, didn't they plant this less than 2 months ago, and now it's harvest time? Turns out only about 10% was ready. Still, that was insane progress. Tenno felt both impressed and a little guilty. He hadn't helped much, so this time, he decided to join in. He harvested potato-like crops, pumpkins, and radish-like vegetables. The only difference, everything here was huge. After harvesting, he steamed some of them and took a bite. Simple, but surprisingly good. Even though the taste was unfamiliar, it excited him. New ingredients meant new possibilities. Meanwhile, the beasts gathered nearby, enjoying the vegetables just as much. And they all had the same thought. They wanted more. So quietly, they started discussing something among themselves. Tenno noticed and walked over, curious. And before he knew it, they had already made a plan to expand the farmland, a new layout map, fully prepared. Oh, and one more thing. It didn't take long after that for Tenno to finally craft it, a proper frying pan, made from the iron ore he found in that nearby cave. Before anything else, a memory surfaced. Not Tenno's, but one of the beasts. It was a nightmare that just wouldn't end. They had been fighting an invisible enemy for so long, they had forgotten when it even started. One by one, their allies were swallowed by darkness, twisting, groaning, losing themselves. He almost lost himself too. More than once, he thought about ending it all, but he endured until, before he realized it, only a few of them were left. With what little remained of their group, they chose to hide inside a cave, waiting, hoping the humans would eventually leave. Time passed. They didn't even know how long. Then suddenly, a wave of magic hit them, pure and clean. It washed over his body, and for the first time in forever, his mind felt clear. His body felt light. But his allies still collapsed, still weak. He wasn't fully recovered either, but at least he could move, hunt small prey, survive. Then he noticed something else. The miasma in the forest was gone. When he returned to the cave and suggested helping the others, one of his companions suddenly froze. Something had entered their hiding place, and then they saw it. Koa, the Fenrir, one of the kings of the forest. Alongside him, a massive dire wolf, spiders, and a human, Tenno. The moment they saw him, hostility flared instantly. To them, humans were the enemy. But then they saw Koa and Chai, their overwhelming size, their presence. It crushed any courage they had. A little earlier, Tenno himself had been shocked seeing how much bigger Koa and Chai had become. But instead of overthinking it, he focused on experimenting. Testing fruits, improving his cooking, even crafting his frying pan through trial and error. And today, he just wanted a change of pace. So he explored a cave labyrinth. That's where he found them. A pack of dogs, a lot of them, but they weren't aggressive. Not anymore. Seeing that, Tenno didn't hesitate. He purified the curse inside them and healed them with his magic. At that exact moment, the leader of the pack realized something. This magic. It felt familiar. It was the same sensation he had felt before. Koa confirmed it. Their master was the one who had saved them, restored their strength. Hearing that and seeing a being like Koa acknowledge a human as his master, everything changed. Respect replaced hostility. After saving them, Tenno brought the pack back home. From a distance, the place looked completely different now. Wide, peaceful, and almost like a sanctuary. Even Tenno himself still wasn't used to how big his home had become. As they got closer, he noticed something strange. Behind the hill, there was now a forest. He was sure there had been nothing there before. The moment he arrived, Chief rushed over excitedly, along with Shuri. Both of them proudly reported that they had been working hard planting fruit-bearing trees. Of course, there was still some light arguing between them. Some things never change. Meanwhile, the newly rescued dogs were frozen, because in front of them stood creatures they had never seen before, terrifying ones. Golems, Turania, and Anfarumi. Just looking at them was enough, and in the next moment, the entire group of normal dogs collapsed on the spot. Tenno thought he'd seen everything. Then he walked behind the hill and found a whole new forest. Not just any forest, a perfectly maintained one. Dozens of leafy plants, more than 30 types that he considered vegetables, and fruit trees, almost 200 of them. And among those, about 30 looked just like grapes. Yeah, that alone got him excited. But at the same time, something didn't make sense. How did the Agricultural Corps plant all of this in just half a day? Still, that question quickly faded as his mood lifted. If those were really grapes, he could make wine. But before that, he decided to focus on something more practical: seasonings. Lately, he'd been prioritizing land development, so improving his food game felt like the next step. And on top of all that, he finally did it. Tenno had successfully made an iron pot. Using the iron-like ore he found, he spent about a month experimenting and crafting his frying pan. It wasn't easy, but it paid off. At this point, Tenno had even started naming the rocks and materials he discovered. First, all-purpose rock, a super useful material. He used it to build houses, create dolls, and even as a substitute for charcoal. It was easy to process and could hold magical power really well. Second, iron ore. Hard to work with, but worth it. This was how he finally got his cooking tools. Third, silver and gold ores. Stronger, more durable, but they required a lot of magical power to process. He used them for things like window glass and knife blades. Fourth, luminescent ore. He found it during cave explorations. It glowed in different colors, especially red and blue, which Fluffy loved, at least until Tenno turned them into bottles. After that, Fluffy lost interest instantly. And finally, enhancement stones. Rare stones are found near the hearts of magical creatures. Tenno stored them carefully in bottles made from luminescent ore, saving them for special situations. Alright, enough side talk. Now, Tenno had a mission. Make flour from those potato-like vegetables. He remembered seeing it on TV once. It should be simple. First, he peeled the skin. Then, he grated it using a silver grater. He wrapped the grated potato in cloth and kneaded it in water until the liquid turned cloudy white. After that, he let it sit for about 20 minutes, slowly draining the water. He repeated the process twice until the starch settled at the bottom. Then, he spread the hardened starch onto a plate and let it dry. Not long after, potato starch done. Right after finishing, Tenno looked around. No one. Recently, a doghouse, well, more like a wolf den, had been built in the yard, so everyone had moved there. The house felt quiet. Yeah, he felt a little lonely, but the wolves had grown bigger, so it made sense. Still, this was the perfect chance to cook. He had already prepared some rabbit-like meat, something he thought tasted close to chicken. He rubbed it with salt, then coated it lightly with the freshly made potato starch. Fry it in a new iron pan with hot oil, and just like that, the fried rabbit-like meat was ready. He took a bite slowly, and yeah, that crispy, juicy flavor. It really felt like fried chicken. As he was enjoying the moment, a baby spider suddenly appeared, snatched one piece of fried chicken, and ran. Tenno just watched it go. He let it slide, but in his head, there was only one rule now. That little thief better keep it a secret. While waiting for the chicken to fry, Tenno suddenly had another idea. What if he could make sugar. There was this vegetable, super sweet, but also weirdly bitter. It reminded him of something his mom once did, making sugar from beetroots. So he tried it. First, he boiled the vegetable to extract the sugar. As it cooked, foam started rising to the surface. That was the source of the bitterness. So he carefully removed the foam and the leftover pulp, then kept heating it down. Slowly, it thickened. The color turned into a deep, rich purple. Once it was ready, he poured it onto a flat surface and let it cool. When it hardened, he took a bite and, yeah, sweet. But not just sweet, it had this strong umami kick too. Meanwhile, deep beneath a tree, something moved. A mysterious beast slowly emerged from a hollow, drawn in by that sweet aroma. At the same time, Koa and the others caught the scent too. To them, it was obvious. Their master was cooking again. But this smell, it was new, sweet, different. Not long after, Koa noticed Karen returning. No need to ask, he already knew. No dragons again today. So, naturally, he teased her a little. A moment later, Tenno finally came out, carrying food for everyone. And yeah, the beast lit up instantly. This time, Tenno mixed his newly made sugar with fish sauce, creating a teriyaki-style glaze for the meat. The result? Everyone devoured it. For Karen, it felt like a reward for all her hard work searching for dragons. While they were eating, Shuri suddenly spoke up. He sensed something, a powerful dragon, but its presence was hard to track. As the others started discussing it seriously, Tenno just sat there quietly, watching. Then, the thing hiding beneath the tree finally approached. It walked straight up to Tenno and started eating. The beast froze. Then, they shouted in shock, because standing right there was an earth dragon. Tenno casually explained that the creature had only joined them recently. Of course, he had no idea it was a dragon. And then came the real moment. The earth dragon and the water dragon locked eyes. For a second, silence. Then, suddenly, both of them took off into the air, flying around joyfully as they had just reunited after a long time apart. The others couldn't help but smile at the sight. Not far from there, the newly rescued dogs could only stare in disbelief. They had no idea what kind of place they had just walked into. Far away, in the kingdom of Envelas, inside the magic stone chamber, the atmosphere was the complete opposite. The mages stood silently before the magic stone, cracked, badly damaged. The head mage had already reported. There was nothing wrong with the barrier itself, but the king, he wasn't listening. Blinded by anger, he ordered the head mage and all his subordinates to investigate the incident, the lightning attack. Within 1 month, no one dared to speak. They could only endure his rage. Deep down, the head mage understood something. This was their own doing, a consequence. Because long ago, the king and the 4 high mages had cast an immortality spell using that very magic stone, and only the 5 of them knew the truth. The lives sacrificed to the magic stone were used to extend their own lifespans and to maintain the barrier. Back then, they believed one thing: power was justice. But now, a voice from the past echoed in his mind. A slave, long ago, had said it clearly: "The world will never forgive you." At the time, he ignored it. Now, he couldn't forget it. The head mage looked at the cracked magic stone. He knew exactly what it did. It wasn't just powering the barrier, it was suppressing the kings of the forest. If that was true, then the one who attacked Envelas was something far beyond them. And now, one question remained. How many more lives would they have to sacrifice just to fix what they had broken? Because one thing was certain. The kingdom of Envelas had provoked the wrath of the world itself. Just a few days later, things started getting competitive. Chief was watching his children, and yeah, they were improving really fast. They had started mastering thread control, way beyond basic instincts. Instead of relying on brute force like Chief, wrapping himself in hellfire and overwhelming enemies with speed, these little spiders were getting smart. They could shoot threads, trap prey, and even set up proper ambushes. And honestly, Chief didn't like being outdone. So yeah, now he was trying harder too. Meanwhile, inside the house, Tenno was dealing with something way more important. Naming his new beast, the one that was actually an earth dragon. Of course, Tenno had no idea. He threw out random names. Kinako, because of its brown color. Rex, since it looked like a dinosaur. Kukulkan, because it sounded cool. No reaction, nothing. Then, out of nowhere, he muttered, "Flying lizard." A name he personally thought was terrible, but suddenly, the creature's tail started wagging. Yeah, it liked that one. So, just like that, the Earth Dragon became Flying Lizard. Since he was already in naming mode, Tenno moved on to the newly joined dogs. The leader became Ai. The males, Sora, Nea, and Raki. The females, Amy, Ayu, and Mira. And of course, Tenno felt pretty proud of himself. Not long after, under the blazing heat, Tenno jumped straight into the river. Instant relief, cold water finally, and right beside him, Flying Lizard joined in. Even after soaking in the cool water, the heat didn't fully go away. Tenno was pretty sure the temperature was close to 40 degrees Celsius. Yeah, this world's summer was no joke. They floated along with the river, letting the current carry them. That's when Tenno noticed something. The river ran deep into the forest, which meant their territory had expanded even further. The forest, the fields, the orchards, everything was getting bigger. Then he saw something weird. Wolves, flying, carrying trees. At this point, Tenno didn't even question it anymore. He just accepted it. This was another world, after all. A little further away, Koa was lying down, clearly drained from the heat. But interestingly, none of them complained. To them, this season was something that had disappeared for hundreds of years, and now it had finally returned. For Chai, this was his first time ever experiencing a real summer. It was tough for the wolves, but not for Chief. After all, he was a Death Keeper, something that lived in the depths of hell. Heat didn't bother him. During all this, Chief started getting concerned, because Tenno didn't look okay. And yeah, they were right. Tenno was starting to feel dizzy, lightheaded. He needed to get out of the water, but then he noticed something strange. Something was holding him up. Underneath him, large, jelly-like creatures had gathered. They looked like giant amoebas. Tenno just stared at them. They were weird, but didn't seem hostile, so he didn't mind. At the riverbank, Chief finally found him. From a distance, it looked like Tenno was just playing with water spirits, and that's exactly what they were. Not amoebas, but water spirits. Creatures are attracted to clean magic energy. While casually practicing with his threads, Chief warned him, don't give them too much mana. Hearing that, Tenno got distracted. Then, suddenly, he choked. Yeah, he still wasn't fully used to this world. Not long after, back at home, chaos. The pot Tenno had prepared that morning, filled with meat and potatoes, was gone in seconds. The beasts were eating like crazy, fighting over food without holding back. Meanwhile, Tenno just sat in the corner, watching everything, thinking, yeah, I need at least 3 more big pots, maybe even more. He also started hoping the dolls could help with cooking too, because of this situation. Not sustainable. But that meant something else. A bigger cooking area, more charcoal stoves, more equipment. And under this intense heat, with all those thoughts piling up at once, Tenno's head started spinning hard. He couldn't think straight anymore. In the kingdom of Envelas, slaves were being prepared, one after another, to be sent into the magic stone chamber to be sacrificed. The head mage calmly observed them, calculating. With this many, the damaged magic stone should be restored. If it wasn't enough, they would simply gather more. To him, this was normal. Slaves existed for this purpose. Disposable warriors, test subjects, tools for the lowest labor. That was the foundation of Envelas. And anyone who ever questioned it, executed, publicly. So now, no one spoke. No one resisted. In fact, many believed this was necessary for the kingdom's prosperity. That was the reality of Envelas. Meanwhile, far away in the forest, Tenno was back in the river, relaxing, floating beside Fluffy. The dizziness from before? Not sickness, just heat. The kind that messes with your head and steals your sleep. But here, by the water, everything felt better. He lay there, watching the dolls working tirelessly in the forest. Peaceful. Almost too peaceful, because deep down, something didn't sit right. If he kept enjoying this life without thinking, it felt like something inside him would eventually break. Still, he didn't want to leave this place, so instead, he started thinking about preventing the curse. Tenno still didn't know anything about humans in this world, but if there was a curse, he was almost certain it came from humans. There had to be people somewhere outside the forest, right? Unless this world was nothing but an endless forest. He shook his head. No, there had to be others. There had to be. His thoughts drifted further. What was this curse, really? Back in Japan, curses were usually tied to targeting someone specific. So what about this? Was the entire forest cursed? Maybe. Or maybe it was something like lingering spirits, something bound to the land itself. But even that didn't fully make sense. Still, he couldn't forget what he had seen. Koa, Karen, and Shuri. All of them had once been consumed by something dark. That wasn't normal. That was something evil. If he ever found the source, he had to erase it completely. While Tenno was lost in thought, Koa and the others, out hunting, suddenly felt something off. Something bad and dangerous. But Tenno felt nothing, still floating there, building theories in his head. At some point, his thoughts went even further. What if curses were connected to demons? Like in those movies, summoning rituals, sacrifices. Dark power is used to spread corruption. It sounded ridiculous, but also possible. Tenno didn't stress about it. Honestly, his brain wasn't working properly in this heat anyway, so he simplified it. Doesn't matter what it is. If it's an enemy, he'll destroy it. But then, his thoughts shifted again. If it really was something like a summoning, wouldn't there be a magic circle involved? And if not, then maybe the root cause was something physical, a person or an object, something that could be removed. But if sacrifices were involved, that made it too dangerous to ignore. At that exact moment, in Envelas, the sacrificial ritual had begun. Slaves were led into the magic stone chamber one by one. The mages stood in formation, guiding the sacrifice, feeding lives into the stone. Back at the river, Tenno kept thinking. He imagined it with a black stone, since he didn't know about a magic circle, something acting as the core. But if the ones behind it died and became part of it, then the problem wouldn't end. So he came up with a different idea. Instead of killing them, what if he just shut them down, put them to sleep, erase their memories, make them forget how to even start something like this again? Yeah, that sounded better to him. Then his thoughts sharpened. If it really was a curse, destroying it wasn't enough this time. He needed to seal it completely so it could never appear again. In his mind, he pictured it, a place locked away, like a shrine, untouchable and isolated. Tenno slowly smiled, satisfied with his plan. And at that exact moment, as the mages of Envelas continued their sacrifice, Tenno activated his sealing magic. The moment Tenno activated his magic, something exploded. A surge of magical energy burst outward, followed by a blinding flash of light. And miles away, inside the kingdom of Envelas, the head mage felt it instantly. The ritual collapsed. The energy wave tore through the magic stone chamber, throwing everything into chaos. The slaves, who were supposed to be sacrifices, suddenly woke up, confused and disoriented. The mages, they dropped unconscious. One of the remaining mages, barely able to stand, turned toward the head mage, asking what had just happened. But their leader didn't answer. He just stood there, frozen. Slowly, the head mage turned his gaze toward the magic stone, and his expression broke. Wrapped tightly around the stone was a thick rope decorated with zigzag paper ornaments. Like something straight out of a shrine, a seal. The magic stone had been sealed. At the same time, deep in the forest, Tenno's eyes widened. Suddenly, his mind felt clear. The dizziness was gone, just like that. He thought maybe it was dehydration, finally catching up and then easing off. But in reality, without even realizing it, he had just sealed the very source of the curse tied to the magic stone. The thing that had been affecting the entire forest. Tenno let out a small sigh. So, instead of overthinking it, he made a simple decision: head home and sleep early.